Okay, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the end of winter, I hope. This is March 4th, 2019 meeting of the Developmental and Governmental Relations Subcommittee to the Holyoke City Council. I'm the chairman. Councilor Murphy, Councilor Tallman, Councilor Valentin, Councilor Sullivan are with me tonight on the table, and I think Councilor Bacon is here. Councilor Bacon is here. Welcome, Councilor Bacon. And just in the gallery, we don't get too many, well, we get a lot of famous people here, but former State Senator Mike Knappich, want to recognize Senator Knappich for being here. Welcome, Senator. Okay, so if I could, I think we'll leave the prior meeting minutes on the table because I don't have them yet for some reason. And then the Law Department Receivership Program is agenda item number 2, but we don't have anybody from the Law Department here. So why don't we move expeditiously to take off the table 3 and 4 as a suspend rules, take off the table 3 and 4 as a package for discussion.
So second.
On a motion to suspend the rules, take items, agenda items 3 and 4 off the table. All in favor? Aye. Those items are resolution opposing expansion of the gas infrastructure and calling for increased development and implementation of renewable and clean energy sources, and a petition from Neighbor to Neighbor Massachusetts Education Fund regarding MOU between HG&E and Columbia Gas to establish new pipeline infrastructure. So we had, I'll recognize you in a second, Councilor Valentin, so I just want to give the ever so brief background here. If we have the, all right, so we met in committee. Let's see, when did we meet in committee? Well, we met in committee in January. We motioned that this was complied with, and then we moved it to full city council. Strike that. We met on December 19th, and that's right. That was the last meeting of the year. While everybody's on vacation, we're still working hard. Then we took this up in January at full city council, but we had discussed it prior to adjourning at the subcommittee meeting that we had understood that that Neighbor to Neighbor wanted to come back. Now, my intention was to take this up at the first meeting in February, but due to snafu, it was not put on the agenda in February, so I put it on the agenda here in March. With that, I'll recognize Councilor Valentin. So, Councilor, do you want to give me an update as to what's happening with this order?
Yes. So that night when we met, afterwards, I had checked in with the Neighbor to Neighbor folks in the hallway, and they had requested that we delay bringing it up to the full council for a vote because they were going to kind of get more of their ducks in an order. So we had a full discussion that evening, and that's why we went ahead with the complied with. My intention for the January meeting, when it was sent back to committee, that evening I was not here, and my intention was that the colleagues would actually table it, not necessarily send it back here. So they just want it at this point tabled in the sense of the full council discussion. It's not that they need to come back here. And so I stated that I would communicate that to the chair of the committee. So their latest request is that we bring this up. I mean, we've already complied. We've said it's been complied with, that we send it out to the full council as it would have been in January. But that instead of sending it back here, that we just table it at the full council meeting. That's what we're.
For what purpose? Why would we do that?
Because they feel that they want some additional time to communicate with all of the colleagues on the body.
Okay, so I'm just one vote. I mean, this is a chance to communicate with the city council. So instead of having a subcommittee meeting at the full city council, we generally don't do that. We generally kind of handle it here.
I'm sorry, I don't mean a subcommittee. I mean that they would like the item tabled for the full council vote because they want the opportunity to connect with all 13 councilors.
Right, I understand that. Okay, so, okay, Councilor Murphy?
Yeah, and I've met with neighbor to neighbor, and, you know, first of all, their enthusiasm and their passion for the cause is great. Obviously, the question is, how do you do it and still provide the energy that we need? But, I mean, just to me, and maybe they don't want this, but it would seem to me that we'd be better off tabling this here, and eventually, when they've got their information, asking us to take it up from this committee where we can have a hearing, because when it gets to the full council, they're not gonna be able to make any comments, and we're gonna be in a situation where, you know, we're gonna basically have the same information we have now.
Well, they'll be able to make comments through public comment. And there's a number of folks that had not had the opportunity to come during public comment that they want to try to have that evening. So that's why I had communicated to the chair that they had asked for the first meeting in, what did they say in that last email I sent you?
That wasn't, I don't remember that was,
I can look it up, but
if you would,
Yeah,
yeah,
I
I
will.
don't remember that being communicated to me, so.
it's, I'm just going to find the email here. But anyways, so when I say that they want the opportunity to communicate with all 13, I don't mean here in chambers. I mean, they want people to have the opportunity to outreach to the counselors as many other folks do about many other issues. So letters, emails, phone calls, yeah, that's what they're requesting.
Right. Any other counselors want to be heard on this?
Go ahead. I'm just looking.
Counsel Sullivan?
Yeah. And, you know, with all due respect to the neighbor group, they've had 10 weeks now to communicate with the council members or send out emails or do whatever they want. We had a very good meeting that night, a robust meeting. You know, I think both sides learned from each other a little bit, but I don't see any reason to continue with it at this point.
Well, does anybody, if you want to make a motion, we can make the motion.
I found the email.
Sure, yeah, what's the email?
So on February 26th, so
Okay,
last week, right? Was that last week?
it was.
I had sent an email to the chair and to Jackie Velez from Neighbor to Neighbor. And their request is our first council meeting in April. That's the date that they're requesting that this be tabled until.
Yeah, it's, okay, well, that's fine. And just the process here is generally, well, here's my opinion then, just for the committee to consider. We can table this right here, and then, and leave it in committee, and then we'll meet again in April, and at that point, we'll take it up for the last time in this committee, and we'll move up to full city council.
I'll make a motion that we table it here
So-
until our April meeting, and we'll take it up at the April meeting before we make a recommendation.
For clarification.
Yep.
So the fact that we had already voted on it and said it had been complied with, would that, would we remain with that status?
Okay, so.
Is my question.
And that's a very good question, because we don't really get this too often, bouncing back.
Yep, I understand.
So it depends.
Okay.
Right, so we'll see what counselors make for a motion.
Okay.
But I think your question has a lot of merit. I don't think it's, the issue isn't ripe now to bring it up to full city council, because all we're gonna do is put it on an agenda and table it. And that doesn't make any sense. However, out of an abundance of courtesy and respect, I heard what Councilor Sullivan said, but I would just rather entertain a motion to leave these two items here in committee. As you can see, we have an agenda item 8. We will set up a meeting in April, as we usually do. And I assure you, we will put it on the agenda at that point.
Make a motion, we table it.
Second.
Not debatable, on motion table, in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nope.
So, all right, so tabled. May I borrow your pen, please? Thank you. All right. Okay, that was relatively painless, at least for most of us. Okay, I still don't see the law department, so time's up.
Got a report.
She's on Main Street. I think she's on.
Great, well, we're on Dwight Street, so that's great. Okay, so if I could get a motion to, I think, suspend and take 5 and 6 as a package, please.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
There you go. On the motion to suspend the rules and take up the table 5 and 6 as a package, all in favor? Aye. Okay, let's see here. We have, let me just get the communication. Oh, great. Thank you, Ryan. Got us organized. Agenda item 5 is, one thing, if I may, just a point of personal privilege. I did get relative to the prior 2 orders, I did receive a communication from a concerned citizen on this. I said to the concerned citizen that I would read her comments into the record. Obviously, I didn't do that, but I will do that at our April meeting. So I just wanted to say that out loud. Okay, so agenda item 5, City Council in accord with 30B and a procurement ordinance vote on an offer from B2 Health to purchase land and building located at 45 Lower Westfield Road and adjacent land for $250,000. Properties are located on the assessor's map. Properties are more particularly described in our deed. The parcel is zoned multifamily residence and professional office, RO, and is a former Holyoke Geriatric Authority. Mayor's acceptance letter and additional info have been submitted to the council. Item 6, from the mayor, entitled Proposal for the former Geriatric Authority property. The mayor wrote us a letter that is dated the 13th of February, and he goes into his reasons as to why he asked that the city council consider approval of investment and job creation proposal. Development will improve the area as well as provide employment opportunities and real estate tax revenue to the city. Thank you for your consideration. And so with us, we have the Purchasing Director, Lori Belanger, our OPED Director, Marcus Murrow, OPED Assistant Director, John Dijak, and if there's anybody else that you want to recognize, Marcos, before you get into the merits of this. I will say this is not a public hearing, but with almost no exceptions that I can think of, we suspend our rules to allow the public to speak. I'm not going to ask for a motion right this second until we hear from the department heads, and then we have a chance to ask some questions. But if the public is interested in this issue, the public I'll ask for a motion, and I'm pretty positive it'll be granted. And so there's that. Marcos, you have the floor.
Thank you, Councilor. Thank you to the committee for having us here today. I do want to, as suggested, provide a brief introduction to the B2 Health team that's with us. So Richard Kresh is the President and CEO of U.S. Health Vest. He'll be joining us probably up front shortly. James Cha is the CFO of U.S. Health Vest. Also for Bay State Health, we have Jeff Kaufman, who's Vice President of Business Development. Barry Sarvet, the chair of the psychiatry department at Bay State Health, and Mike Knapik, the Vice President of Government and Community Relations. So at any given point in time, depending on the question, there may be someone addressing those questions.
Yeah, Marcos, and I'll just ask when they come to the mic if they just give their, restate their name and title so I could type it into my notes, because I wasn't able to type that in right then and there, okay?
Sure.
Thank you.
So the site you on the dais know it. The former Geriatric Authority is on Multifamily Road, Lower Westfield Road. It is a sizable building that has been vacant for several years. The Geriatric Authority itself closed in about 2014. The city eventually took the asset, and it was briefly used by the sheriff's department for transitional purposes for them. Ever since then, we have been marketing the site with very little success. We had RFPs without responses. We had one RFP that garnered one response for residential use for the purchase price of $1 and demolishing the structure. However, when more diligence was done on the site, it was seen that the cost of demolition was substantially higher than the developer was willing to consider. To be frank, after a long time, the feedback we were getting from the development community is that the structure itself was daunting. We were actually, as we were running this RFP process and marketing it, we were actually quietly preparing a draft proposal to the council to demolish the structures ourselves and then market it as vacant land, because we had a firm understanding that this would be more attractive that way. As luck would have it, however, we were successful in this last RFP round, and we garnered three firm responses. You're familiar with them with the packet, but just in general, the proposals were for a behavioral health hospital, which is a proposal that's before you, the proposal that was selected. The other two were for a mixed-use development, primarily residential, with the highest amount of commercial development that would be allowed by zoning, which would be, for this site, about 8,500 square feet. And then a third proposal was for a private special needs school. For reasons that we hope will seem evident to the committee, the B2 Health was highly advantageous in what we thought was the most advantageous for the city. As an overview, B2 Health is a joint venture between U.S. Health Vest out of New York City and Bay State Health out of Springfield, Massachusetts. The project is about we can pass to the next slide. It is a $30 million project, all said, and it encompasses the demolition of the buildings by the private company. They would then build a state-of-the-art, and I see I already have a typo here, it's a 70,000 square foot hospital, not a 75,000 square foot hospital. Building with 120 beds for inpatient psychiatric care. So inpatient, what that means is that someone visits the facility, they stay overnight, many nights receiving care. There would be approximately 250 employees servicing the site. That would be throughout different shifts, so they're not all there at the same time. And of course, new positions would seek to prioritize Holyoke residents. And this, very importantly, in recognizing that this will probably come up during Q&A, this would be a private company doing the development and owning the land, so this would be tax-paying. The proposed project is very similar to others that U.S. Health Vest has built or rehabilitated in other places. Most close to us is their facility that they're, I believe, about to open, if they haven't just opened it, in Worcester, here in Massachusetts. And it is also a joint venture with UMass Medical Center. They clearly show the experience of running hospitals, and that both of the members of this joint venture run hospitals. But also, very importantly, they show that they have a very recent track record of being able to get financing for this type of hospital, which was very important to the committee making the evaluation when we were comparing projects on paper. We really have to come up with a recommendation on how feasible do we think something is. Do we believe that this investment will actually materialize, and not take the city down, several years and not seeing anything come of it. I think we're all familiar with other projects where that's happened. It's nothing that any of us want to see. We want to get it right the first time. The sale consideration, as it's stated in the order, is for $250,000. Our best estimate for the real estate taxes that this would generate, off of the parameters that they provided in their proposal that we've provided to Tony DeLude, our city assessor, is that this would provide around $205,000 in annual real estate taxes. One additional benefit that was that in their proposal, they actually did not need the entire site that was being marketed. So in negotiation, they agreed to, in the closure, not have the entire site. So the city would retain a portion of the site. You'll see it there. Everything in orange was what was being up for sale. And then the dashed red line that comes up would be where we would break it off. So they would have the site towards the north, which is on your left, is what we would be selling them. Then we would retain a site which I think that says 3.6 acres, give or take. So we could issue a following request for proposals, sell that as well, so have additional income from the sale and from another development that is congruent with the neighborhood.
Okay, yeah, I just want to make sure we're looking at the same thing, Marco. So, see, that doesn't have okay, so it looks like the area more or less behind the congregate house is not going to this particular bidder.
The area behind and to the south, along Lower Westfield Road,
Okay,
correct.
yes.
The city would retain that. It would still, it has been declared surplus, so what that allows us to do is put it up for sale again.
Is that how much of that is developable? I see it
Hard to
says
say.
3.68 acres.
Yeah.
I can read, but
So it is RO, so technically anything in an RO, half of it can have lot coverage. So that's one way of answering the question. But some of it is ledgy, and so it's all a matter of cost and concept. We've been to the moon, so I'm sure we can get around any ledge issue. It's just a matter of will it be cost effective. There is a pretty good flat area next to the congregate house that we believe would be for prime development. At least half of the site, though, is probably like towards the tracks is very inclined.
and just maybe it's just because of the map I'm seeing, but the congregate house building, is it really that close to the
No, so
to some kind of a property line?
so there is a layer which is the surveyed lot line, and then there is the Mato layer, which is what I did on PowerPoint today for this presentation. So what I was trying to do was highlight the boundary of what we were marketing, not put to scale how far the building was from
All
the
right.
property line.
Thank you.
So that's a high level review of the proposals. For the specifics, what I would recommend to the committee, so that you have the benefit of a detailed or an in-depth presentation of the use, I would suggest having Richard Kresh provide an overview of the use and operations of the facility.
Well, just before you sign off for right now,
Oh, sure, I'm here.
so in their proposal, we explained explain the B2 Health's offer to pay 75% of the tax obligation. Would you explain that to me, please, if I?
Yes, so there's a thread, and that 75% is moot. So I'll backtrack. When we put the RFP out, a standard condition that we put on request for proposals is that should a nonprofit entity be successful as a buyer, that they would have a deed restriction on the sale, whereby they would still be responsible for 50% of the taxes on the site. So that is a standard provision in the RFP. By submitting the RFP, you agree to that. When we were doing the review, however, a lot of the benefits that we saw from this project came from tax income, because this was a private entity. The 50% didn't even come into consideration. They would be paying 100% as any private entity. The concern that we were anticipating for ourselves and for this conversation was what guarantee would we have, given that the joint venture is with a nonprofit entity in Bay State Health, that U.S. Health Vest wouldn't serve as merely a developer intermediary. This happens all the time. You get not in the healthcare facility, I'm just saying in development in general. You have a developer that buys the land, does the development, and then flips it over to someone who's going to operate it. Given that the other entity is very well qualified to run a hospital in Bay State Health, we wanted to have some sort of legal assurance or mechanism that that was not going to happen in the short term. U.S. Health Vest's their representation had been that they're in this for the long term to own it. So we negotiated. What you saw in the 75% was part of the initial conversation. Ultimately, where we landed was they are agreeing to an additional 10-year restriction where, should they sell to a nonprofit, they would still be responsible for 100% of the taxes. So what that's designed to do is for us to be able to credibly represent to you that for at the very minimum, no matter what happens for the next 10 years, this site would be fully tax-paying, no matter who owns it. After that, it would revert back to our standard provision of 50%. So that's the background on that. It's an improvement upon our standard conditions, but we wanted to make sure that that was there given the specifics of their proposal.
Okay, so, all right, so that wasn't super clear. So I just want to make sure we all get that. So 10 years will be a full tax value?
That is only if, yes, that is the guarantee. But remember, this only applies if there's a nonprofit. If B2 owns this for the next 30 years, it's paying taxes for the next 30 years. It's just, it's only if it switches to a nonprofit hands.
Well, I mean, well, I mean, B2 is going to own the property, right? So I assume B2 could just assign a deed to B2 not-for-profit. I would do it. I would do it as soon as the 10-year mark hit in the calendar. I'd mark my calendar for 2029, and I would say, oh, at June 1st, 2029, let's file a deed, so long as we don't have any other debt obligations. And then we'll just present that deed to the city of Holyoke and say, well, we're a nonprofit, so I would do it. So am I simplifying it, or is that?
The hypotheticals of it, I'm not gonna debate. What we did is the 10 years is more than we would have gotten otherwise, right? We can't anticipate someone's intent. We can only take someone for, we can only create mechanisms that protect the city, right? So we have a standard condition that guarantees us at least 50% of income from a nonprofit. What we've done is we've guaranteed 100% for the first 10 years.
All right. Just give me a minute, please.
If their intent was tax avoidance on real estate taxes, they also could have just come in with a proposal where a nonprofit owned the hospital itself. However, what they've done in this proposal and what they've done in other places is that the for-profit entity owns the hospital and pays the property taxes.
Okay, well, I
guess what I'm getting at is this isn't a concession to the company. This was actually a concession to us. This is something that we an additional protection that we got for the city. This wasn't something that they were seeking as a concession to not pay taxes.
right. So
more for us.
what we'll do is hopefully before I'll hear from Ms. Belanger as to who the other bidders are, because we are going to hear that in open session. So we'll hear what they were, and then we'll compare it to the concessions that the B2 Health provided. So then we'll see how that goes. All right. So well, hold on. It's fine. Counselors are recognized, but just in queue. Okay. So Marcos, how did you want to? Because I have counselors who want to ask questions. I think they want to ask them of you at this point. So why don't we address these questions first, and then we'll go back to your agenda. I saw Councilor Murphy saying.
He was first. Mike was first.
Councilor Sullivan.
Thanks. Marcos, on this tax question, so how did we arrive? We got a $30 million investment, but that $205,000 tax number only equates to $5 million. Where'd the other $25 million disappear to?
So I can't answer for the city assessor. What I can say is that the assessed value does not equate the amount of the investment of a project. He is assessing it based off of the value of the finished square footage that would be created at the end of it. So based off of that, and I would say, back of the envelope, it is not dissimilar from other similar uses in the area for medical care and of similar sizes. So if you look at the value per square foot, it is similar to that. That's the most I can tell you. I'm not qualified to answer assessment questions.
Get that? It seems kind of slim to me. The parking deck at the mall, just the parking deck, slab of cement, is valued at 17 million, and that's what they're paying taxes on at the mall. The other building that Bay State Medical has up there was previously valued for an independent business at 10 million and was paying taxes on $10 million, and now it's gone to zero because it's a nonprofit.
That's actually a good comparable. So it is, I think the total value is probably around, including the land, it was 10 or $13 million, as you say. But it is more than twice the size. So that facility is over 200,000 square feet. The proposed facility here would be 70,000 square feet.
Okay. It's, more to come, I guess.
Council Murphy?
Yeah, along the lines of what Councilor Bartley was asking, so 100% for 10 years. So are we in a position where we could negotiate it and make it 75% after the 10-year period? I mean, where do we get to the 150? Where'd that come from?
I feel like maybe these questions are going down where you think that we gave something up.
I'm just trying to make sure we get what we need.
So Massachusetts law
Yeah.
allows for charitable nonprofit organizations to pay zero on real estate tax. In order to mitigate that, the city has put a standard provision on every real estate transaction it has done for as long as I can remember being here. It may even predate me, where if a nonprofit organization buys a piece of land, it would be responsible for 50% of the tax liability. Why not 100%? That decision was made prior to me, and it's probably recognition that there is some sort of functionality that a charitable organization does in the community that is worth some break, but that also they are responsible for something. So that is the standard provision no matter what.
But it's not something we're obligated to do.
No, absolutely not. Absent us actively putting that 50% provision there, then anyone we sold land to could do whatever deed transfer to any nonprofit organization and just pay absolutely nothing. So us putting 50% there is 50% more than had we gotten under any scenario in the future that a nonprofit owns this.
But
right?
if we put 75%, we're getting another 25% more than we got at 50. I mean, I could be wrong, but it looks like we're in a position we can negotiate 100% for 10 years, and then we can also have another rate.
If that's the policy going forward, then maybe the policy should be revised. I'm describing to you what the policy has been for years, right? This is nothing that is unique. The 50% is nothing that is unique to this deal. The only thing that is unique to this deal is that on top of the 50% guarantee, we have managed to secure a 10-year 100% guarantee, which is unique to this, favorable to us, and unprecedented, as far as I know, in the lifetime of this policy, right? And it goes to address the very unique issue, which is that one of the members of the joint venture is a nonprofit. The building that we just discussed has been a matter of other public hearings, and so we anticipated that this concern would come forward. What if, this committee recommended the mayor selected a project based partially on taxable income? What assurance do we have that would ever materialize? And so a decade was something that they conceded as something that they would gladly sign over for 100% because they have no intention of selling it. Right? That is a key. It wasn't it wasn't a big concession on their part because they have no intention on selling it anyway. They have to pay 100% of the taxes anyway. It is an additional guarantee that we obtained.
Again, going back to that argument, then if I'm negotiating with somebody and they want to stay and they're going to stay from past the 10 years, then they ought to be comfortable saying if we sell it to a nonprofit, they'll be paying 75%, whatever the number is. I mean, I just think we're in a negotiating position, and I just want to make sure that I'm not against this arrangement, but I want to make sure that we're getting the best arrangement, not only for the next 10 years, but for the life of the property.
I just want to clarify, we're not in a negotiating position right now. The proposal before us would have to get a vote up or down.
But if the proposal got a vote down, we'd be back in negotiating.
We would have to put out a request for proposals again.
I want to recognize Councilor McGivern has joined us. Welcome, Councilor McGivern. Okay, any other questions from councilors? Seeing none. Marcus, how do you want to proceed?
My recommendation for the committee, which you can decide to take or not, would be taking advantage that the leadership of B2 is here and inviting them to have a brief presentation on the use and operation of the site.
Sure.
So, I mean, I would invite Richard Kresh and whoever he designates to the front or to the mic, wherever you feel more comfortable.
Lori, why don't you kind of shift down a couple of desks, please? And then, Lori, since you're being so kind, can you just help make sure the mics are on if you don't mind, please? Thank you. Gentlemen, welcome. Just introduce yourselves and we'll be off and running.
Hello. Hello. Good evening. I am Richard Kresh, and I am the president and CEO of U.S. Health Vest.
Good evening. I am James Cha. I am the CFO of U.S. Health Vest.
Welcome to you both. Fire when ready.
Okay, so we are here to talk about the development of the acute psychiatric hospital on Lower Westfield Road. And I brought along a rendering of a similar facility that we built and is currently operating in a town called Marysville, Washington, which is about 40 miles north of Seattle. And so while on this particular project here in Holyoke, it's too early to have made drawings or have formal design of of what the building would look like, but the buildings that we develop build ground up, and we have another one that recently opened in Illinois, in New Lenox, Illinois, a suburb of Chicago, has a similar look. This one is brown. It sort of fits in with the Pacific Northwest look, blends in with the community there. The very similar building in terms of interior layout and footprint in Illinois is a sort of a grayish tan stone color, which fits in again with the environment that building is in. We haven't gotten that far here to determine what the aesthetics of the exterior would be, but the basic buildings are similar, and the hospital, the building which would be licensed as acute psychiatric hospital, would serve patients who are in need of short-term psychiatric hospitalization. The most frequent admitting diagnosis is affective disorders, or usually depression, disorders of mood. So patients who are typical patient, not all, but I'd say the majority, the single largest group would be patients who are depressed and generally suicidal and need to be admitted to a hospital to treat the severe depression and to provide a protected and safe environment that has a therapeutic program that would allow them then to return to the community. Typical length of stay is varies a little bit with age group and type of illness that the patient comes in with, but a typical length of stay is around 8 days, give or take, a few days. The building is a two-story building, a little hard to tell from the picture there, but it's a two-story building that has about 70 to 75,000 square feet. The exact dimensions and layout of the building will be influenced a little bit by the site and requirements that are necessary to get adequate parking and access and fire lanes and such, all of the normal development aspects of a building. So, but typically we would expect this to be around 70,000 feet, 2 stories. The entire building is secure, even though probably 98% of our patients are voluntary, patients who willingly agree to enter the hospital. We still maintain a double perimeter of security in the building. We keep each patient care unit locked so that we have better control. We know where everybody is all the time. And if a voluntary patient did want to leave the hospital, they, in theory, could, and they can't be held against their will. But they would then have to go through the discharge process, and which would require, a disposition, a living arrangement, and so on. But they could leave. But the patients also do participate in various activities that are not on the nursing unit, and such as dining, where patients go to a dining room where they feed them, to get their own food and eat, as typical dining room would be. There are recreational, both indoor and outdoor recreational facilities. The indoor ones being more of a sort of a gym type arrangement where they can get exercise. The outdoor one, which is also secured with a fence that looks as if it's part of the building, is so patients can get some fresh air and a little exercise and walk around, and so a respite from being inside for such a long period of time. Never do patients leave a nursing unit without at least 2 staff members accompanying them, and the number would depend on the nature of the patients and severity of illness and so on. The building itself would employ, when it was in full operation, it takes a while after it's open for the hospital to be able to admit it to its capacity, and have to gradually build up for staff training purposes, for just general operations purposes. We ramp up the census, as I say, kind of slowly, so that everyone has a chance to absorb the additional work volume. And ultimately, there would be about 250 employees across a wide range of service types, ranging from physicians, nurses, social workers, office personnel, to food service, housekeeping, maintenance people, and it's a wide range of professional categories, some of which require special training, license, and certification. Others don't. The jobs that we offer come with full benefits, so every one of our employees gets paid vacation, sick time, personal days off, health insurance, a opportunity to participate in a contributory 401k plan, dental, I don't know, did I leave anything out? But, the standard full benefit package, including the paid time off, so they're good jobs, not just jobs. Those 250 people are spread out since the hospital is open 24/7. There are multiple shifts, and so they're, I don't know, at the max, probably during the daytime weekdays when the office personnel are there, maybe 50, 60 employees at one time. There are some differences. People know we're licensed as a hospital, so the building has to be built to the hospital life safety code, and we have to comply with all of the state, Joint Commission, CMS, Medicare requirements as far as the building and operations. Because of the nature of a psychiatric hospital as opposed to, let's say, a general hospital, which we're all familiar with, it's very quiet. There's limited visiting, usually only a couple of hours, a few days a week. Many of the patients who enter the hospital have a variety of issues, some of which relate to their families and living situations, and while we provide family treatment as part of the inpatient stay, the patients are occupied with therapeutic activities from starting breakfast at 7 a.m. through the evening hours. So there's no free time, downtime where patients are sitting around as long as they're well enough to participate in the program. So there's limited visiting, and there's no emergency department, so there are not ambulances with sirens coming to the hospital. When patients are referred in from other healthcare facilities in the area, they are transported by either ambulette, or if they are in a somewhat more serious type of illness, they may be transported in an ambulance from the facility where they were referred from, but they're not accompanied by lights and sirens. As far as any outpatient facility, which is a very busy activity in a general med-surg hospital with ambulatory surgery and outpatient clinics and the like, we don't do that. We have a day hospital program, which is a step-down treatment facility from inpatient service for some patients as a transition back into their community living arrangements. And the day hospital program is an all-day program. Patients come in the morning, they participate in programmed activities all day, and then return to their residence in the late afternoon, early evening. I think we will, just one last comment, and that the hospital does treat all ages, so we will be treating seniors and adolescents, children, as well as different levels of the units. The nursing units in a hospital, typically a hospital this size would have about 5 nursing units. So the geriatric programs would be provided in one discrete unit. The children would be treated separately in another unit. And then among the adult patients, we get different levels of acuity. And in order to provide the best therapeutic environment, we're able to separate the higher acuity from the lower acuity patients, and each patient can then have a clinical program that's tailored to their needs.
Mr. Kresh, what's your background?
I'm a physician and child psychiatrist by training.
And how long have you been in your current position?
I've been in the psychiatric hospital business for my entire career. I've spent 10 years after I finished my training. Actually, it wasn't a psychiatric hospital. I was the director of a children's long-term chronic illness, chronic disease hospital in New York City that was affiliated with Columbia Presbyterian Medical Center, where I practiced. Practiced psychiatry for about 15 years, and then transitioned into the current business starting in 1990, and have been full-time in the business since then.
And how many facilities, I really don't know much about U.S. Health Vest, but how many similar facilities to the one in Illinois and the one in Washington does the company have in the United States?
So we are currently operating 7 facilities. Over the years, in the companies that I've developed and led, we've owned and operated 20 hospitals, behavioral hospitals, and of those 20, 10 were similar to this project that were ground or de novo startups. Some were renovations of existing buildings, some were ground-up construction, depending upon the circumstances. So we've had a lot of experience with the development, and we understand the process of starting up and building a building.
And you understand the process of developing a building in what's a fairly residential neighborhood, so I think that's probably why I assume that's probably why or maybe it's part of your spiel, you go from without notes, and I really like that. But you realize what kind of neighborhood this is. It's a very thickly settled residential neighborhood. On the other side of the coin, before we get to that other side of the coin, it's not only is a thickly settled neighborhood with a school with an enormous playground that gets a lot of use. There's development to your north in Whiting Farms, and then there's development across the street in Devonshire. There's a proposed development that would more or less abut you, would be across that little unnamed street, which I'm going to talk to the Ward 5 councilor. We got to find a name for that street, because there has to be a name for it at some point. Maybe Mike Knappich Way. I kind of like the sound of that. But there's got to be, but then that's on, I think, about 7 or 8 acres, and that's proposed to be 100 units of market rate housing. And so I mean, what would you say hypothetically to a developer who's coming to? I mean, listen, we're like any other municipality. We're just trying our best to try to expand the tax base in whatever way we can, and within reason, of course. And so we had what we thought was a pretty nice proposal. So we granted a zone change in ordinance committee. We have the ordinance chair with us tonight, who's also the Ward 5 chair, which your section of the city is, we call it Ward 5. So, I mean, what would you say? I mean, so Devonshire is market rate. I mean, it's maybe $1,100-1,200 a month there. I mean, that's pretty good for Holyoke. The proposed abutter to your north across the unnamed street, I would imagine be somewhere in the $1,000, $900, $800 a month range. That's more or less a market rate. And here you come with a psychiatric care facility. Now, no matter how much you say to me, it's going to be quiet and no sirens and peaceful, harmonious. But we're going to have outdoor recreation. I know we're going to have 2 staff there all the time, but what would you say to a developer? What would you say to the owners of Devonshire? Their concerns, and I think I forwarded the same concerns we have all the time. It's lighting, noise, parking, traffic. Lighting, noise, parking, traffic. Those are the standard. What would you say to them, Mr. Kresh?
So I'd say that they're fortunate that we're building next door to them, because our building will improve the neighborhood. We will provide an attractive use of that land that will be a brand-new building, that will be a nice building, that will fit with the character of the town and the area and the neighborhood that it's in, that the lighting will be installed so that it does not shine into the residential properties and only focuses on the parking area of our that's necessary for our use of the building. Our grounds are well-maintained, and they will be landscaped and look nice, and I think we'll be a good neighbor.
Marcos, is this subject to site plan review?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, I knew the answer, but I just want you to say it.
You are correct.
What a shock, right? Okay, I'm gonna go right down the line here. Councilor Valentin's recognized first.
Thank you. Thanks for coming in tonight. And my background, way before I got into politics, is mental health and substance abuse, so this is very close to my heart. Question about the facility itself. You spoke about inpatient psychiatric care, which obviously is usually locked units. I'm assuming that is what this will be at all times. So it's not that folks are roaming around the neighborhood. It's not a question. I'm just stating it for the record for folks that are not as familiar with psychiatric inpatient units. Do you also will you also be serving substance abuse? I mean, are there detox facilities, or is this? I mean, I understand there's dual diagnosis, but is there going to be a specific detox component to this facility?
No, the being licensed as a hospital, the patients are required to meet admission criteria to a hospital. And as you noted, that a drug treatment facility, a substance abuse rehabilitation facility, generally is unlocked. Mm-hmm. Patients are free to come in and out and do, as they, as permitted by the operation of the facility. That's not the case with the hospital. As you correctly noted, that we do not treat patients in a hospital licensed facility with the primary diagnosis of substance abuse. So the primary diagnosis would be a psychiatric one. The reality of life is that many people who have bipolar disorder or depressive disorders or more serious kinds of mental illness, or even less serious anxiety disorders that are very paralyzing to them, often try and help themselves by self-medicating, and in the process will develop a secondary problem, a new problem, and that is substance abuse that complicates their underlying psychiatric illness, and that needs to be addressed. But we're not admitting and treating patients who are, seeking substance abuse treatment. All treatment is directed by physicians. There's a treatment team led by a psychiatrist, and we have 24/7 nursing, physician 24/7 physician presence, and it's set up as a hospital, not as a drug treatment center.
So just so folks understand, it's not going to be a in and out of folks that are under acute detox need. It's not going to be similar to, for example, a methadone clinic where folks are in and out and there's traffic and there's a volume. And so that is obviously not the design at all of this program and this facility.
Correct.
The other piece is that the question about this facility coming into a settled neighborhood, I mean, I'm thinking of the other inpatient psychiatric units in Western Mass. Bay State is in the middle of not, a beautiful farmland. The Providence Hospital, which has an inpatient psychiatric unit, I mean, it's a little bit distant from other things, but it's not that it's, in a country club setting. So, at Cooley Dickinson Hospital, I mean, they have an inpatient psychiatric unit, and it's in a very also thickly settled area. So I think this would not be an exception to what folks expect in the Western Mass area. So I just wanted to kind of point that out, that I don't think this would be extremely out of the norm of what we have in an urban setting such as Holyoke. And also, just so folks know, because they don't have the proposal in front of them, you would be demolishing the structure that is there now and building from the ground up a new state-of-the-art modern facility. So some folks could see that as you may be getting rid of an eyesore that's dated and bringing in something that is more tuned into that area there. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Council Sullivan?
Thanks. You mentioned earlier that you had 7 other facilities. So have any of those facilities flipped over to nonprofit, and how do they interact with their local communities tax-wise?
Well, we have never, and I've been doing this longer than I like to admit to, 30, 40 years I've been working in this field, and of which all but 10 years was in the for-profit sector. And we have never sold anything to a not-for-profit. Generally, that's not the way it goes, and we have acquired not-for-profits, and there are rules that govern the transition from for-profit to not-for-profit, or from not-for-profit to for-profit, that put strict rules on the proceeds of the sale, and that would certainly not be something that would fit professionally with what we've done in the past. So all of our facilities, including 2 joint ventures, 2 other joint ventures that we have with not-for-profit facilities, are taxpayers.
Okay, and so besides these 7, there aren't there weren't 10 or 12 at one time. There's none other that have transitioned over to a nonprofit.
No. The other ones are ones that we owned 100% our own, and when they did sell, they sold to a for-profit, so it had no impact on the taxable status.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Bacon, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for coming down. And I just wanted to clarify something I thought I heard around the programming. I understood you will have the 120 beds, and will your day hospital program also be run at that site?
Yes.
And what proportion of your programming do you see that being?
Usually the day program runs about 10 to 15% of the inpatient census. So while the hospital is 120 beds, it's any hospital, very difficult to fill to capacity because there are rooms that are set aside for different age groups or gender, whatever, and or acuity sometimes. And so typically a hospital would be considered full when it's running about 80% occupancy. So our expectation would be, even though we're building to 120 beds, that the likely, and this is looking forward a few years, it takes a while for a hospital to mature after opening, that we would, if all goes well and we're busy and the need is as strong as we believe it is in the region, we're looking at a census of 100, give or take, patients on the average day, and which would probably lead to a day hospital volume census of about 10 or 15.
Okay.
So it's really it's not so much a strong a critical business line of the hospital as much as an accommodation for those patients who are not quite ready to make the transition from full-time inpatient to just sort of general outpatient care, and they need a transition period for a few weeks.
And so how long are they usually in that day hospital program?
Anywhere from a few days in some cases to at the most maybe 2 to 3 weeks.
Okay. So the feel of it sounds like it would be more that of a sort of a medical office setting in terms of the comings and goings. They'd be coming in the morning, leaving at night
Yeah,
from that particular program.
yeah, it wouldn't be like a medical office building, because medical offices, people come in for short visits, so they're in, out, in, out.
Actually, less than that.
Yeah, so much less, because they come in the morning, they spend their day,
The
there's a
entire-
structured program, they leave in the afternoon.
Okay. And that's where you come to the quiet.
Right. The inpatients stay inside.
Right.
And even when they're outdoors, there was, I just want to clarify about the outdoor space. The outdoor space, well, you can't really see it very well, but there's a brown spot here. That is actually a wall. And behind that wall is a big courtyard that has plantings and seats and you know, so patients can be comfortable outside, but it appears as if it's actually part of the building.
Yeah. And we actually did have a program that was up there that had some outside use, sheltered from, you know, the abutters. In fairness to some of the other descriptions given, it is very close down there with the residences. Some, I mean, they're in a residential area, but this is really neighbor to neighbor down there. And so that's why you're hearing these kinds of questions and concerns relative to traffic, noise, how the people would be coming and going. Because there were some other activities up there that left people with questions. And so that's kind of why you're seeing that angle from us.
Yeah, so what I'm aware of is that there were 2 drug treatment facilities that occupied the space after the Geriatric Authority closed, one run by the police and then another one. But those were rehabilitation programs and open programs. So the difference is that our patients are not going outside.
Yeah. And so I think that's really the context from which you're hearing a lot of these questions. So looking ahead to the future, once the hospital is established and all, do you ever see where you would be adding outpatient or clinic components to the inpatient and day hospital program?
No, because Bay State will be maintaining their what are called partial and hospitalization programs and intensive outpatient programs. So they will be maintaining them throughout the region, and there would be no need to increase the location, you know, the volume of patients there.
So the long-term view shows that those would be adequate, or you could expand in those other sites?
Well,
For
it
that
could go
need?
to another site, but our focus is really, the hospitals tend not to have satellite locations, so they're sort of self-contained, inwardly looking facilities. Based on our primary business is really what we do. Our mission is inpatient service.
All right, just checking. Thank you.
Councilor Given?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Dr. Welcome, and thank you for answering our questions. There's 2 areas. I have no question about the need for a psychiatric hospital. I have no question about the ability of B2 Health to be able to provide us with or to be able to develop the type of hospital that would fit into the neighborhood, and I understand everything you're talking about. I do work in the court systems. I understand the difference between substance abuse and the crossover with psychiatric needs. I have 2 areas, though, I'd like to better understand before I could even think about voting on the offer that the city has agreed to. B2 Health is a for-profit organization, and you're owned by BFK Franchise LLC?
I'm sorry.
BFK Franchise LLC? On this?
No,
No?
no, I think that's a separate entity.
Okay.
Mr.
That's
Chair,
an unrelated entity.
just want to make sure your mic's on, right? Is that green light on?
You're going to turn the mic.
No, it's on. Yeah, just pull it closer to you, Mr. Chan, would you, please? Yeah, just so you can your voice can be heard, okay?
Are you on the stock exchange?
No.
Okay. Where do the profits go?
Well, the profits are distributed, would be, in this situation, would be distributed to Bay State and to the entity that U.S. Health Vest, and to U.S. Health Vest. So they would be split on a pro rata share of ownership to both Bay State and U.S. Health Vest.
And the other area I'm a little confused on, or maybe we just need to know, is where do your patients come from? Are they court-ordered?
We do not have a forensic unit, and do not plan to have a forensic unit at this hospital, so there would be no adjudicated patients or patients who were diverted necessarily from jail, because it would be patients, or the vast bulk are voluntary. Patients come from different sources, so our young patients, our adolescents, generally are referred by schools. The vast majority of the kids are referred to us by the school systems, occasionally from an emergency department, where parents will bring a child to an emergency department at a regular hospital, med-surg hospital. Geriatric patients, the seniors, primarily the biggest single referral source are nursing homes, where the patients become difficult to manage and either harmful to themselves or maybe overly agitated that they can't be managed in a nursing home setting, and they need more stronger behavioral intervention. So those patients would be geriatric patients, most frequently referred from nursing homes. Not always. Sometimes from families will bring a patient. Sometimes, again, a family will take a patient to an emergency department because that's what they know to do. So they'll go to the local hospital. The local hospital can't provide the services that are needed, so they'll refer to our facilities. The general adults come from everywhere. Again, most commonly from the emergency department of hospitals, where they present and the diagnosis is of a behavioral illness is made, and they then get referred to our facilities like ours.
Geographically, are we looking at a regional source, or?
It tends to be regional. There aren't as many psychiatric hospitals as there are med-surg hospitals, so we tend to, and fortunately there aren't as many patients, so that require inpatient level of care. So we tend to draw from, because it's a specialized service, tend to draw from a wider radius and geographical area. So we would, so I don't know exactly where, but there really aren't, going west, aren't many psychiatric beds. Going to the east, the closest hospital, other than Providence, here locally, I believe the closest psychiatric beds would either be the Bay State units that are currently operating, or when they close, the hospital that U.S. Health Vest has a joint venture with UMass in Worcester. So I'd expect the patients to come somewhere between here and Worcester, going pretty far west and even to the north.
Okay. So with court referrals, if we can get back to that, any court-ordered patients or any civil commitments on Massachusetts, that's Section 12, I believe?
Yes, and we'll get those. We don't have a lot of experience yet in Massachusetts to know exactly what the percentages will be, but we do accept court referrals, and occasionally patients require a involuntary commitment.
Okay. Is any of the commitments, civil commitments or criminal commitments, in a lockdown facility part of the hospital?
No, because we're not equipped to handle a criminal commitment.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilor Murphy?
I want to get some clarifications as to exactly the relationship that you will have with Bay State. So your company is building the building and owns the building. Would that be correct?
No, the joint venture.
Okay.
This structure is as a joint venture between U.S. HealthVest and Bay State. And each party has, in our operating agreement, has specific functions and that we focus on in the joint management and ownership of the hospital. And so the Bay State will be providing, their responsibilities tend more towards the clinical side in terms of physicians, medical leadership, clinical standards, and so on. U.S. HealthVest's role is more focused on the development and the building of the building, managing that, and then the day-to-day operations going forward.
So in terms of day-to-day operations, in terms of controlling nursing, staffing, that kind of thing, or?
Well, it could be
at Bay
anything.
State?
It could be, it ranges from food service, providing food and pharmacy services, housekeeping, nursing, the allied professionals. So we have social workers, recreational therapists, and techs, nurses' aides, and really everyone that's involved in running a hospital.
Okay, now, just as I understand it, and people from Bay State, you correct me if I'm wrong, but you have 98 beds, psychiatric beds that you're going to be closing. Is that correct? We allow him to answer my question, Mr. President?
What?
From Bay State.
He's from Bay State, but I want, because.
Sure, yeah, we don't, just come out to the microphone, people, just tap it, make sure it's on. No, there's a switch up there. There you go.
You got it.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm Barry Sarvet. I'm a psychiatrist, and I'm the chair of the Department of Psychiatry at Bay State Health. And just a small correction that the beds that will be closing for Bay State will be in the number of 70. So we have 98 beds total in our system. We have a 28-bed unit at Bay State Medical Center in Springfield, which is currently planned to remain open. And it's the units in our regional hospitals at Greenfield and Palmer and Westfield that will be closing.
Okay, so stay there. I might as well let you answer this one too, if it's okay, Mr. Chairman. I'm giving you a promotion, Mr. President. So, because this is, as I started to look through all the information and in terms of the potential hires, if you are closing the psychiatric unit in Greenfield, the one in Palmer or Ware, and the one in Westfield, am I correct in assuming that there's a likelihood that the nursing staff or the people that were working there would be offered a job here?
Not automatically. That the hiring decisions will be made by the management team of the joint venture. We are trying to make sure that the employees who will be losing their work at Bay State entities are able to take advantage of potential opportunities, but we don't anticipate that every single one of those employees would wish to transfer to seek employment at the new hospital, and there will be also different specialized units for which they may or may not be suitable in terms of their training and their background.
Okay, but most of them, am I correct in assuming most of them would be offered an opportunity to come here?
So not necessarily offered a position, but encouraged to apply and encouraged to sort of take advantage of potential opportunities.
Okay, for now, I'll stop. Okay. Thank you.
Al Sullivan?
Yep. Thank you. So at these other 7 facilities, my first question here would be, have any of the patients ever wandered off the facility and caused any harm in the neighborhoods or?
No.
Never.
Never.
So my concern would be we've got a school right here, a playground, a densely populated neighborhood. You've mentioned some locking doors. Obviously, the outdoor space is a little bit of a concern. Can you elaborate a little more on what kind of security and assurances you'd have for the public that somebody can't just wander off the facility or break out?
Well, as I mentioned before, the facility is locked. It's locked both in the specific nursing units, and then the perimeter that the patients are permitted to use, which would be dining room, dining room, maybe a few other activities that are off the units and may be shared by patients from different units. There's another perimeter. So that's also locked. So the patients, for instance, you can't go into the lobby either direction, either into the hospital or out of the hospital or any of the exit doors without unlocking them. The patients are always accompanied. Patients are never alone without staff. So they're always monitored. They're always accompanied by the staff. Even the outdoor space is, has a 10-foot, 12-foot wall without any footholds on it, with double-sided wood vertical slats that are without penetrations in between. So, it's really not a climbable wall. And so there's significant security to maintain patients where they're supposed to be. We have not had in our history, anyone who has left the hospital and caused any problems. We do have other facilities that are next door to a school, and it is a good neighbor. It's even if you look around Massachusetts, I've visited a number of hospitals in Massachusetts. Particularly the older hospitals tend to be in residential neighborhoods. They were just the way it happens. Someone donates land, or the residential neighborhood encroaches on the hospital. But over time, they're in a residential neighborhood, and typically they coexist fine. Our patients, for the most part, are not dangerous to other people. Most of them, they're suicidal, and they're really dangerous to themselves. And we're preventing them for the most part, not always, but generally we're preventing patients from hurting themselves until they can make a more reasonable decision.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Bacon.
Thank you. For folks who may be watching, because we have a local channel and sometimes folks tune into this who may not be familiar with inpatient psychiatric, I was just trying to think of maybe a better known comparison that people might relate to. Do you think it would be a fair comparison to say if folks were familiar with a secure unit for folks suffering from dementia or Alzheimer's, where the units are secured, the people are escorted, and the environment is supported? Do you think that would be a fair comparison for somebody who's sitting out there trying to imagine what it would be like in terms of the security and the support and supervision for the inpatients?
So a facility in Massachusetts that has the same license, provides the same service, would be, say, McLean Hospital, which is a freestanding psychiatric hospital license with the same license that we would have here. It's not a unit. It's the entire building. It's
Correct.
Actually more secure than you would see in a unit within a med-surg hospital, because in a med-surg hospital, the specific unit may be locked, but the perimeter of that unit is not locked.
Right. So just to give them a comparison, it would have more security than what folks may have been able to visit or may have family members that are being served by a place of that nature. So this would be more secure than that.
Yes, it would be.
I'm just trying to give people that may not know just something to relate to. Thank you.
Right, okay. I just have, since we mentioned the $30 million is the investment, where's that coming from?
From a combination of sorts. Some of it would be equity that the partners in the joint venture would invest. Some will be in the form of construction loans and then mortgage on the property. So a mix of sources.
And the $30 million is based upon, Mr. Chan, maybe you want to answer that, based upon, based on what? I don't want to answer the question for you. How do we derive at $30 million?
Well, it's based on anticipated construction costs, land acquisition, demolition and abatement of the existing buildings, and then construction, and sufficient working capital to support the hospital until it's able to operate in the black.
Oh, okay, so I wasn't, okay, so the working capital might, depending upon what figure you'd come up with, that working capital might be a significant part of that $30 million. But that's hard to say at this point, and I don't need an answer on that, but I'm just trying to get a little closer to home as to, we have, say, $30 million project, and that's the headline, and then we realize that the assessed value, with a guesstimate of $205,000 in taxes, is probably like, $5.2 million, $5.3 million, hard to say with the tax rate right now. I mean, there's a significant difference between $30 million and, we're taxing on that, and what winds up being $5.2 million for 10 years. Despite your history, what we know is for 10 years, and we can't see beyond that, for sure. Okay, with that.
I think she might just tell.
Lori wants to be recognized.
Well, Lori's not recognized, but she will be.
Mr.
She will be
Chair,
recognized very soon.
I've pulled up the breakdown from their proposal on,
Oh, great.
on there. It should be in the communication as well, but if it's not, I can forward that as well.
I think it is, yeah.
I'm sure it's in there, Marcos.
That's fair.
Okay. All right, so Marcos, we heard from the proponents. What's next on your agenda? How would you like to move this along?
Whatever the committee wishes, whatever hasn't been answered.
Okay, so I know we want to hear from the purchasing director as to the other two proposals. I know we want to hear that. John, you're good? You're okay. Okay, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Kresh, I really appreciate your time, and thanks for coming up to visit us. It's really means a lot, okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we're lucky enough to have the purchasing director with us. Lori,
Chairman,
floor is yours.
I'd like to offer the process of how we're presenting the recommendation to the committee tonight for B2 Health. The RFP went out. We received 3 proposals. They were opened on January the 3rd. The proposals were then given to the 6 members of the review committee, and each individual reviewed the proposals and scored them. We had a meeting on the 7th of January to review.
Well, Lori, who's on the committee?
Sure. The review committee is John Dijak, Mike McManus, Crystal Barnes, Marcos, myself, and Sarah Meyer, who's no longer with us in planning.
Let me just, if I could
Sorry.
just a touch slower, if you
Sorry.
don't mind. Okay, so John Dijak, McManus,
Crystal,
go ahead.
Marcos, John, myself, and Sarah Meyer, who was in planning at that time, but she's no longer with us, the city. But there were 6.
Okay,
So we had a group meeting on the 7th where we reviewed our notes and discussed the proposals and had a group, score sheets from everyone. The price proposal was opened on the 8th. So the technical proposal, which was just the actual proposal minus the price proposal, that was opened on the 3rd. And on the 8th, we opened up the price proposals. From there, we scheduled interviews with all three proponents, which was B2 US Health Vest, John Foley, and Jesse Liu. That was done during the week of January 15th. After the interviews, we had a working session with the committee on the 30th. Whereas we had some follow-up questions. I know Marcos had sent out an email asking some of the proponents additional information. Once that information was received, we had a group follow-up on the 5th of February, and everything was presented. And after discussion, thorough and thoughtful discussion and responses from the email and feelings after the interviews, we felt that the best proposal for the city in partnership would be with B2 Health. What I would like to say is their initial price proposal, they came in at $1 and wanted an extreme amount of tax incentives and gas and electric and everything. So that's the first part. The second part is...
I'm sorry, who came in at $1, Lori?
They offered initially $1.
Who are they?
B2 Health.
Okay, yeah, okay.
And they also wanted, I think, an extreme amount of tax incentives and things that we could offer on that side. And after our discussions and follow-up and getting additional information, to the credit of Marcos, he was able to negotiate a better package. So we went from $1 to $250,000. Those tax incentives and what they were looking for originally have now subsided. The additional 10-year protection was not part of the original proposal, but was negotiated in. And I think one of the things we need to look at is B2 Health was willing to give us back the acreage around the congregate house, which, after looking at some of the proposals, there might be an opportunity there for some additional building and or development. So with that being said, that was negotiated back up, and we felt that was a good proposal to bring to the committee.
Yeah, what were the other ones, Lori?
The other proposals were with Jesse Liu. He was proposing mixed use, primarily condominiums and some residential condos. Well, they were mostly residential condos, but some commercial condos. And Positive Regard.
Well, Lori, why don't we just drill down? What do they, what do they offer, that sort of thing? Do we go into negotiation with them? I mean,
We did not negotiate with them.
okay,
But the policy, their description in the sheet here is primarily residential mixed use featuring 48 market rate apartments in the existing structure for the Geriatric Authority, 68 condo units for sale, in addition to some commercial condo space, about 8,500 square feet. This would be a phased-in program, and again, well, it would be subject to market conditions. That's why they were phasing in everything.
okay.
Mr. Liu offered $350,000 for the land, and based on the assessor in terms of what would be residential and commercial, anywhere 109 to 400,000 would be the taxes.
All right,
But because everything was phased in, it was all needed, it wasn't really definitive. The next proposal would be Positive Regard. It would be for rehab of Building B for a private school and special education needs for children. He would be tax-paying. He has experience in educational field. He's looking for partial funding. And again, this project would be phased as well. And he offered $456,000 for the land. And once we got the information from the assessor's office, the real estate taxes would be in the area of $198,000.
Why was Mr. Liu's, what went wrong with Mr. Liu's proposal? Why was that? I mean, because I'm just looking at the numbers. What did the committee see with his proposal that you don't want to go negotiate further with him? What was it? What was the downside, if you will?
His development experience primarily. He has some smaller projects in South Hadley, but what he proposed was a significantly larger project. In addition to needing to get a condo management firm or an apartment management company, that needed to be thought out and brought into the program that wasn't upfront. And there was we would have liked additional information in terms of his equity and ability to fund the project. And I think Marcos can
Sure,
speak a little.
Marcos.
So the proposal would have started as phase one as rental apartment units, reusing Building B, which is the most modern of the buildings. The original, or I should say, the less older of the buildings. The oldest building, which is Building A, was originally proposed as commercial, but it was constrained by the zoning. So I think their intention was then to make that as apartment rentals as well. And so the back end of the site would have been used for condo units that they would build a model unit and then they would sell it as the market would react to that. So there are certain problems programmatically that we saw with that. Number one, the proponent group had never built anything over 5 units. In fact, they could only point to one development of 5 units and was still under construction in South Hadley. That's the conversion of the former library in South Hadley. Everything else had been small to medium scale commercial. So it's not just a matter of the construction itself of the trade, but it is if your entire project hinges on the successful management of a rental operation, it's not the same as just building it and selling it. You actually have to have a quality product that people demand and want to live there, and so that it's well kept, that you have a good tenant base, so that those condos aren't going to be sold if that apartment building doesn't live up to the promise of the site. And so I'm sure this committee and the council is more familiar with problems that happen in a neighborhood if one building isn't managed well. So that was principally the experience issue. There was no diligence shown around, and we asked for these things. You can start it, or if you have enough money, you can buy it. But there was no thought put into a management company, a business planning aspect around this stuff. So that was the whole programmatic issue around that. Number 2 was the financing of it. They anticipated doing equity financing for the entire $21 million project. And so they showed us an impressive bank account that had a portion of that, right? That I can only aspire to have that kind of money. But it wasn't even half the project. And so the representation continued to be that they have overseas investors that they could not provide any evidence that either A, that money was already here domestically, or B, there was a surefire way of getting that money from overseas to the United States in Holyoke. And if that failed, whether they had the experience getting domestic financing. So when you mix issue number one with the programming with the backup of can you get domestic financing to do residential rental units, and you have no experience and no management capability of it, I'm sure a bank would probably say, no, we're not going to just give you $7 million for you to test to go from 5 units sold to 40-something units for rental, right? And everything was based off of that. So we did not feel comfortable at all that this was feasible. That group would probably be well suited to a smaller project or building a portfolio.
Thank you.
If I could, Mr. Chairman?
Councilman McGivern, sure.
Just along the lines, Marcus, why, or wouldn't you be able to use the advantage of reverter language to speed up the phase-in construction projects, and at some point, put a number on the condos that would have to be built?
So the reverter issue aside, that goes to would an action actually happen. So I'm bringing up multiple issues. Even if the action happens, I'm saying the committee did not feel comfortable with the fact that they would have a management that would upkeep the quality of the type of housing that would demand not just further development on the site, but that would keep the quality of the neighborhood per se. So a reverter would not address that. It would be post-reverter. You could hypothetically have basically a flop.
A reverter could address it.
The reverters that we have address whether construction happens or not. If the suggestion would be that a reverter is placed so that we say, if your development sucks, we take it back, I doubt that any developer would put in what their first phase would have been, which is almost $7 million at risk just for that.
Did you try using that language?
I did not use that language, whether if your development sucks, we would take it back. But
Not that language. Come on now. What's the reverter language would be to health?
The reverter language for anyone requires action to happen. So if in the period of 2 years a development doesn't happen, and as we've discussed before, there are some nuances, but essentially it's if in 2 years you haven't taken action, we take the property back.
Action, we used to use reverters a lot more in depth. There's a promise being made here. And this committee looked at 3 promises. So it's not just action. I think there has to be commitment to the proposal itself, along with action.
So there's a timeline on the reverter. So I think this one says in 6 months after closing you have to start construction. So there's a timeline of actions on the site.
Construction of the proposed project,
Yes.
not just construction of anything.
No, they have to keep to the proposal. They can't just do whatever they want.
And the 10-year real estate taxes would be what? For B2 Health?
The total amount of taxes, I don't have that number. I mean, nominally, if the estimate is accurate, 205,000, then it's that times 10. That times 10. So 2,050,000. So yeah.
For 10 years.
Over 10 years, yes.
The condo projects and market rate apartments would be permanent.
If they happen. That's the big unknown. So even at the beginning of this hearing, we were talking about another development that has 100 units just to the north of that, right? So we haven't, bear in mind that this area hasn't seen that amount of market rate housing put in there. So had we brought that proposal before you, then the obvious question would be, would the market already be saturated with 100 units of housing, right? Because this would be further down the queue.
Markets aren't predictable, I understand. Across the street is Devonshire, which is above market rate, that's doing extremely well with a waiting list. The 100 units you're talking about are going to be market rate at the very least. And that developer was here not too long ago, extremely high on what they see as the market is predicting for that type of need within this area, within this region itself, but more important within this area because of the location and because of the way the area has been developed. You know, be it what it may, but, you know, this second proposal fits what's going on in that neighborhood a lot better than a psychiatric hospital.
That's your criteria. I'm not going to argue against your opinion. What I would say is that if you're asking me to predict what the next 10 years would look like in an alternate proposal, then I can only tell you what I can responsibly predict that would happen. And so handicapping what would actually happen in the residential proposal at that scale, I would have had to, and I did, just like we all did in the committee, bet that was not going to be optimally developed. What we did do in the proposal that's before you is that we reserved a piece of land that we could develop residentially to complement in terms of not just the development style and look of the neighborhood, but also provide some of the benefits residentially, because we do recognize that there is some interest in the area for additional residential development. But it would have been irresponsible professionally, I'll speak for myself, to come in here and represent that I was confident, absolutely confident, that yes, this proposal, we can have 100 units over there of rentals, plus another 40, 50 another rentals and 68 condos. There's no data that would back that up, none whatsoever. We could desire it, but we wouldn't know that would be the case.
From a professional point of view, I appreciate and accept that. But let me tell you a story, because what I'm worried about is 10 years from now, where the city budget's going to be. And it was, we'll say 35 years ago, because I don't remember years, that the Wang project was going to save the city. You know what the Wang project was?
It was the old Bay State.
You know what? It's the new Bay State.
Sorry, yes.
Yeah, where we get zero tax dollars, and I don't know how many cars, you know, are assigned to that unit, courier cars. I don't think we get $1 in excise tax from those cars. And the Wang project is long gone. We need new growth to protect the city budget if we're going to do the services that we've been providing for decades. And you know, the 10-year plan is nice, but the long-term plan doesn't make it.
So just to clarify, the long-term plan isn't any different than the 10-year plan. The 10-year plan, if that's what we're calling it, is a 10-year protection that otherwise we would not have. So I cannot emphasize this enough. The standard policy of the City of Holyoke has been to put in RFP a protection for the city's income, that if a nonprofit, charitable nonprofit, owns a piece of property, that they've bought it from the City of Holyoke, we would at least get half of it. We've negotiated at least all of it for 10 years. The plan you heard here today from the proponent is to own it for as long as they are able to, and they've never sold anything to a nonprofit. Obviously, we don't control anything, so that happens after we sell a property, but for a deed restriction. And so the 50% that's there is a protection to the city, but that's not the plan. The plan isn't for it to go to a nonprofit.
Where's the 50% on the Wang building?
There was none, but I don't know what anyone was thinking back in whenever that happened, the 70s or 80s.
We don't even know when it happened. It just happened. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilor Valentin.
Thank you. So this proposal executive summary sheet is very helpful because obviously we were not at the committee meeting where the six of you took the time to go through all these proposals. So thank you for taking the time to do that, for breaking it down for folks that don't have this document in front of them in the categories of proposal description, experience and professional qualifications, ability to complete the scope of work, which is crucial, which we've been talking about for the last probably 15 minutes, and then the considerations and the rating. So to me, when you look at this just on paper, you know, and you look at the offers that people made, and thank you to the Office of Planning and Economic Development for going from the $1 to the $250,000. We appreciate that. So when you look at it on paper, it looks as if, you know, why are we, again, we've had this conversation, I think 4 times in the 5-6 years I've been here. Why are we going with this offer if it's the lowest one? The reality is that, you know, plans are great and ideas are wonderful, but if the resources are not there to make it happen and have it be a concrete piece of something that's happening, then it doesn't matter what we really sell the land for. So to me, when I look at the list on this proposal executive summary sheet of the 3 proposals, of how the committee went through it, even though the $250,000 offer for the land is not quote unquote the highest, it does seem, based on the experience of U.S. Health Vest and obviously the reputation of Bay State and the partners that are involved in this, that they would be obviously ready for the financing for this $30 million project. I don't see that from the other 2 folks. So, I mean, I appreciate them submitting the proposals, but if the investment is not there, then the plan is not going to come through. So to me, even though it is the lowest figure for land, not by much, but it is the lowest, it seems as if it is a real project in the sense of how doable it is. And we've been through this before where the timelines are crucial. And we do have the capacity of changing things down the road if we need to, if this doesn't work out. But it seems to me as that this proposal from B2 Health would be ready to go. And based on that, I will be voting in favor of it tonight. Thank you.
Councilor Bacon.
Oh, thank you, Peter. I'm not sure if you went this deep into the analysis when you were looking at the proposals, but I was wondering if part of the consideration was the impact on the neighborhood of anticipated traffic and trips in and out relative to Project 1 and Project 2. And if you did consider that theoretically Project 2 did build out to its fullest capacity, if there was any analysis done in that regard and what that impact might be on the people there and the projects already approved.
Sure. So formally, we did not run a trip analysis. We didn't have we didn't estimate what it was. I would call it a qualitative analysis. So qualitatively, for residential development, you would expect that you're adding traffic to the right-of-way at peak times. So people are generally, the majority, going out in the morning to work, school, whatnot, and coming back in the afternoon from school and work and whatnot. So if you have, and this is a big part of the theory around mixed-use development, right? Mixing up the types of uses. If you have a predominantly residential neighborhood, the right-of-way is being dumped with vehicles at the same time. If you have a use that is somewhat different and has a different traffic pattern, whatever the numbers may be, then it will be putting vehicles on the road at times when it's not already congested.
Right. So maybe just to oversimplify it,
So
perhaps
the hospital wouldn't interfere with the homes.
So if we're thinking about a hospital and we're comparing it to the old Geriatric Authority, would it be comparable? Would it be less than? And I mean, we're just talking generalities, and
So-
we all understand that.
Sure. In general, I would expect it to be comparable to the Geriatric Authority when it was in operation, but I would expect it to be less of an impact than a new full residential development at the site.
Given the number of units and the size that they were
Correct, because
projecting.
because the vehicles are being put on for residential, they're being put on at 8 a.m. Whereas there's nothing specific that at 8 a.m. is just clogging the streets.
Right,
for a
and they were
hospital.
proposing, I think, over 100 units in total.
Yes,
In
correct.
the second proposal. I'm
Correct.
just trying to get a sense of impact,
Yes.
because that's been the biggest concern coming to me, is, first the security aspects because of the other experiences, and then second, the impact
Yeah.
because of how tight everything is down there.
Correct, and so we did definitely take it into consideration. We did discuss it. It wasn't a specific criteria,
Right.
but we know the types of questions that come up. We know the constraints on the site. We look at zoning, for example, wasn't a criteria, but we're mindful of that kind of stuff. And so yes, traffic was something that was discussed. We looked at we tried to get the best estimate that we could on how many employees there were for the geriatric. So roughly we think that would be similar to that, but less than a residential development.
Thank you.
Okay, so we are going to not go any more rounds at this point, unless a counselor has a very fast question, because I did make a promise that we would hear for the public, and we've been kind of going on this for an hour and a
One
half.
last question.
Counselor Murphy has a quick question. Go ahead.
Is the congregate house part of this project?
No, it's not. I can't answer that for you. It's not part of it. So
Is that correct?
That is correct. Yeah.
it's not part of it. So, Counselor Tallman.
Yeah, just be brief, no questions, and I thank you for bringing the proposals forward to us, and I think it's important to note that this Geriatric Authority's been up there, a vacant building for a number of years. I know there's been some work up there. We've had people up there and agencies up there a little bit, but we have nothing coming in there from right now. I mean, and I'm looking at that area where we could have jobs, we could have tax dollars, people that, union people working there and having putting jobs there, people that would be working there, people that are providing for their families. And Holyoke does struggle now with unemployment, and that we do need people in that area. My concern also with the word counselor is the area, and I'm sure there'll be studies and traffic studies and site plans, and but having a building there now vacant with nothing there, and up north of that having another development, which is going to add to that neighborhood. It's going to add some traffic, but it's going to also add tax dollars. And my thing is bringing something in this, and I thank Dr. Kresh for his very important view of what this hospital is, and it's needed in this area. This whole region will be needed with the 70 beds closing at Bay State. I think this is a very excellent project for this neighborhood, and with good design and good planning, this will work well for our community for jobs and for employment in this area, which is direly needed. So I'm very much in favor of this plan.
Okay, Marcos, John, appreciate it as always. I'll entertain a motion to suspend the rules and allow the public to address.
So moved.
On the motion to suspend our rules and allow the public to address us, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so we suspended our rules, and we said that, so this is not a public hearing, but we do it all the time. Doesn't mean you have to speak. We just want to give a courtesy to the public. I see a number of people here, just in case they want to address us and weigh in. I think everyone has been here from the start of the meeting. So, I mean, the information you've received is basically the information we've received. It is true that we had a handout, but it's important for us to flesh this out, and that's what we did tonight. We fleshed it out, I think, pretty thoroughly. I think any reasonable person would look at that neighborhood and find that it's a pretty heavy residential component, very thickly settled. Add to that a school. Primary school. It's a pretty dense neighborhood with buses and school kids, and then this being a rather unique proposal, I don't think too many municipalities deal with acute care psychiatric facility on a whole lot of occasions. I just don't think it happens that often. So you add all those together. I think this discussion was important, but now I think it's more important for us to hear from the public. So if the public wants to address, what we do is we walk up, we raise our hand, then we walk up to the microphone and we just state our name and address. That's all. And whether you're from Chicopee or Boston or wherever, you have we'll hear you. You can probably budget. A minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. We're not going to slam the gavel unless it's Kevin Jourdain-esque, and then we have to sort of rein it in a little bit. But the main thing is we just address the chair. When we're speaking to Mike, we just address the chair. We're not addressing any of the proponents or any of the department heads. You can raise a question, address it to me, and I will put it forward to either the department head or to the proponent. Okay, so does anyone from the public wish to speak on this matter? Okay, please. Okay, so I see two hands. Yeah, so you, sir. If you would do me a kindness, just come up to the mic. Just state your name and address.
I'm Scott Goulding. I'm from 19 Quinn Drive, which is in the neighborhood of development. As a neighbor and as a resident, I like the idea of this. The original development as a geriatric authority, this isn't that far off from that. The fact that they've, it seems to be a good faith effort, have made a 10-year commitment to being a taxpayer and not taking advantage of the nonprofit status is great. And the whole proposal sounds great. I'm also a union carpenter. There are a lot of tradespeople in the neighborhood. As much as I can appreciate the commitment to the good-paying jobs that will be there, I just sincerely hope that this joint venture follows through like Bay State has done on their own and follows area standards and pays or uses contractors and businesses that pay area standards while they develop the property.
Okay, Ms. Goulding, thank you so much for that. I appreciate those words. Jason? Hold on, Jason. Go ahead, please.
Jason Garan, 150 Mountain View, Holyoke, Massachusetts. So I stand up here today not having spoken to U.S. Health, but knowing Bay State very well. The relationship with them has been a solid one with working with the trades, and we are hopeful that U.S. Health, as they did with Gilbane in Worcester, which is a union company, somebody who pays health insurance, important, right? This is a hospital. It may not be a hospital for your knee, but it's a hospital for your head, and you need health insurance to do that. So standard wages and benefits are really critical to this community, and we are asking that it be part of the discussion. It be pushed by the city council, who represents us as taxpayers, that we want these projects to be done with working people that are treated fairly, no wage theft. That is often the case around projects of condos and residential units. And we appreciate the thoroughness of this committee, Chairman Bartley. I'm very impressed with how this is run, and we're excited to see something happen with the Geriatric Authority. The building is a blight. It needs to come down. And I think this is the best opportunity. Marcus, putting this plan together with the team, I think has chosen the right project for this site. And so we're excited about it. We're excited about the construction. And I appreciate you allowing us to speak on this.
Thank you. Is there anyone else from the public who wishes to address the committee on this topic? I don't see any other hands raised. I'll take a motion to close the abbreviated public hearing.
Motion to close the hearing.
On the motion to close the public hearing portion of this subcommittee, all in favor? Aye. Okay. Let's see here. So the way this works is, and just for the public, because most of us here, I think, generally know how this works, is that this is a subcommittee of the Holyoke City Council. We just make a vote on whether to yes, no, or table. So at some point, we'll ask for a motion on that. And then what happens is that if we move it to full city council, that's where the real vote happens. If we move it out tonight, the full city council meets tomorrow night at 7 o'clock. And that meeting, we're being asked to convey the property. So at that meeting, since there are 13 members of the city council, the proponent would need 7 votes to convey it. It's not a 2/3. That's what we use to declare surplus. That's already happened, and so we've been asked to convey the property. Marcos, I think that Johnny, what I'd like to see happen is take this proposal and it's similar depending how we vote, of course. Well, regardless of if let's don't table it, it should go out to every city councilor, because I just to make sure it does. It may have been done already, but I just in 13 billion emails, I can't find it. So because that's important. Or you may want to consider just putting it on councilors' desks tomorrow night. You may want to consider that as well. Okay. I guess for my take, I generally we want to look to the biggest dollar value, whether it's for the, in this case, we're taking the third highest dollar value, but I think what the subcommittee was saying is that the long-term financial ability is probably more in line with a couple of big companies, like Bay State. I mean, you really don't get a much bigger much bigger company than that. I know they're nonprofit, but it's a pretty big company. And so, and the other U.S. Health Vest, it seems like a pretty sizable company to me. And I presume, Marcos, just like one question, what did you do for due diligence relative to the, because since it's not a publicly traded private company, how do you know they have the capacity to do a project like this? Or what did the committee, what facts did the committee find that shows that this company has a financial capacity to do this?
Well, the first thing is that they have a history of owning, building and owning other hospitals that they're there. They have the signs, they have the ownership that they have represented.
Okay, so you know that how?
Well, you can find a lot of stuff on the internet that is pretty accurate.
Okay, so you did, yeah. You just did an online search.
And so, more importantly for us is, okay, you may have done this over the years. We want to know that you're still bankable, that you can still secure financing. So, as I mentioned earlier, the most recent project was in Worcester. If it didn't just open, it's about to open. And so we wanted to understand how they're going to finance this. And when they said it was similar to Worcester, we asked for their documentation about that. In your documents in the communication, you'll see there is one question about that, and they said they reference a letter that they provided, but that was that they didn't want that shared with the public. We have seen that letter. It is from a credible licensed domestic bank that financed them well over $20 million. So they showed us in their financials that they were able to secure it, that they have very, very recently, and that they have built these facilities before.
All right, so I just felt like that was important to sort of get that out there a little bit. So I'm not saying you had to do a site visit to Washington or Illinois or.
I ran out of
I was going to say a site visit to Worcester is a site visit to Worcester isn't exactly beyond our city's budget. So I just wonder if you had done that, but it doesn't sound like you did. Okay, did any other committee members want to make, well, first of all, did any non-committee members want to make a comment? Okay, Councilor Bacon.
Thank you. I'd just like to make a couple of comments and then just my final thoughts on it. I think one of the counselors here talked earlier about what we would wish to be able to do and what, as a practical matter, we can do. My first wish is always to give folks in the city the opportunity to continue to live in the city when they no longer want to keep hold of their individual homes. I think we did take a step in that direction by approving the zone change recently. That was always my personal vision for the geriatric site. Having said that, I do think we have to look at the proposals that come before us, and while we can remain optimistic, unfortunately, we find in a review of past projects that if people don't come in with strong financials, a strong history of being able to deliver, often the dream is stronger than the reality. So I think in this particular situation, and to Councilor Bartley's point, this is a very unique situation. It's not likely to come up in any community in the next decade or maybe for 4 more decades. I'm not sure I can remember the last time, other than the Worcester project, that a hospital has been built, at least to my awareness. And so I do see the regional need. I do see the benefit of access. I see folks in the area having to go east and out of their communities further than perhaps the Franklin County people might object to. If there isn't perhaps a more robust option in the area. So I do find that, given the concerns that were put forth to me from folks in the neighborhood and folks looking to build and do projects in the neighborhood, I find them to be sufficiently answered. to the best of my ability. So I find myself in support of this project. I think it is a good project, it's good partners, and I'm going to take their past history of keeping their hospitals as an indicator of the future, that they will be a good neighbor and a continual taxpayer to the city as well as a regional provider. So that's my take on it. Thank you.
Committee members, I want to, all set? Okay, Council Tallman?
I just want to state again that there is a definite need in this area, with the beds being closed, and, some people in the other areas of the Commonwealth may not be happy it's down here in Holyoke, but we have an opportunity to bring people, to this community where there's a need. We're taking down a building that's been there for a number of years, a blighted building that has nothing in there, that is really an eyesore to that neighborhood. We're bringing in tax dollars that we're not collecting. We haven't been collecting in a number of years. And the most important thing, and my summation of this is the jobs that it's going to provide. Not just union jobs that taking, building this facility, but also the jobs that will be created. And hopefully a lot of those jobs, I think, and stated in this, letter, that there's going to be Holyoke jobs. The mayor's, most of these jobs will be people within this community that need jobs, and people that live right up in that neighborhood actually that need jobs. So hopefully we get trained people and people that are right within that radius of that neighborhood that can get jobs for this project. And I'm very much in favor of U.S. Vested Health, US B2 and Bay State to try to really bring some development and some tax dollars for years to come into this community.
Okay, so the motion, if the committee wants to go forward, the motion would be to accept the offer.
So moved.
A second.
On the motion to accept the offer from
B2 Health?
B2 Health LLC to purchase the former Geriatric Authority, at least 13.168 acres. On the motion, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, the offer's been recommended to be accepted, and we'll proceed accordingly as I mentioned before. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll just take about a 30-second, 1-minute recess just for John to break down. Well, wait a minute. Alicia, do you need this video screen? Yes, please. Okay, we're going to leave it there. Okay, so we'll just take a 1-minute break, okay? Thank you.
I'm having a lot of I'm her state director for Massachusetts. If you need us to speak tomorrow, it was, but it was time. All right, good to see you.
Okay, all right, thanks for coming out.
See ya. Good night.
So Alicia, yeah, make yourself at home over there. We're going to do Crystal first, okay, because we skipped over her. Wait a minute here. Well, say 15. You make it there by 11. Crystal, would you do me a kindness, and would you re-forward that to the DGR committee, please? No, I like the color better, and but I want the color on my screen for tomorrow night. That's, all right. Okay, counselors, you ready to go?
Mm-hmm.
I'll let you, careful. All right. Hey, we all done it. We got cords everywhere. Okay, can I get a motion to go back to regular order, please?
Motion to get back to order. Motion to take item number 2.
Okay, motion on the table is made and seconded to take item number 2 off the table. On the motion, take up item number 2. All in favor? Aye. The Law Department update, DGR on the City Receivership Program. I'm just, first of all, I apologize to the Law Department because I should have taken this up 3 months ago, because we're about to get another update. But this is something we implemented last year to get 6-month updates about Holyoke's receivership program. And with that, I'm going to let Attorney Crystal Barnes, who's our acting solicitor. You're still acting, correct?
Yes.
Okay, our acting city solicitor, to tell us about what's happening with the receivership program. Maybe, Crystal, just a Reader's Digest summary of what the receivership program is in your own words, and then tell us about the receivership program itself, what's been happening in the last 6 months. Thank you.
Sure. So I think part of the agenda item as well should have been a receivership case study. We did a case study on 193 Sycamore Street, and I only point to that because we get a lot of questions about what the receivership program is, and people assume that we immediately just give these properties away to contractors, and it's really not the case. There's a narrative in the front of the case study that kind of goes through really what we try and do with these properties, and 99% of the time, the properties that end up in receivership are bank-owned, and the bank doesn't know that they own it. There was a foreclosure, and it's really not on anybody's radar until we find out it's vacant and blighted. The other part of the properties that get put into receivership generally are from a deceased owner. The family isn't in touch, the owner passes away, and it just goes into disrepair, and we find out. There are situations where an owner just gets in over their head, and generally they show up, we try and work with them, we try and find services to assist them to make the repairs, but all in all, receiverships are generally an emergency last resort when nothing else seems to work. So the narrative in the case study actually kind of walks you through the process as far as, you know, how these come about. Usually a neighbor points it to us, a city councilor points it to us, or we happen to just drive by and say, what's going on with this property? There's still tarps on it. It still appears to be in disrepair. We have code enforcement meetings every week, so the influx of properties that are constantly on our radar is ever evolving. There's certainly larger properties that are on our radar, but unfortunately receiverships are targeted towards residential properties. So we can sometimes deal with the mixed use. If there's, you know, a majority of the property is residential, we can look to receivership, but it's a little more difficult. The statute only covers the residential portion of those properties. So what happens is it would go into receivership. The commercial part could be made safe in such a way that the residential part of the property could be utilized, and then that commercial part would have to be rehabbed after the receivership process is completed. Part of the statute allows them to foreclose on their lien, much like a mortgage foreclosure. So what happens is we get a list of court-appointed receivers that is vetted by the court. They're financially sound, they do projects, they have the wherewithal to complete these projects. We take that list from the court. It's nothing that we seek out. We don't look for contractors. We aren't given names of people. It's a total randomized process. In fact, I use random number generator and an Excel spreadsheet, and I click it 5 times, get 5 numbers, and those are the emails that go out first. It's a first come, first serve. And what happens is I keep note of who's been offered properties. If that number comes up again in the next round, they get bypassed because they were just offered one. And we go through the list until everybody's had a fair shot at a property that went out to email, and we start over. So Occasionally, we do get large projects, and you'll see one in the receivership update, one or two actually, where we do need somebody who has a little bit more financial means. So some of that is a little bit more selective, but 9 times out of 10, it's a random process. The other benefit to receiverships is when they foreclose on the lien, it wipes out everything else. They also are forced to pay municipal liens, so our taxes get brought up to date on that property. Any sewer and water liens get brought up to date, any fines, code violations, et cetera, that may be on the property all get paid as part of that lien. Like I mentioned, it functions much like the mortgage foreclosure process, so they post it in the newspaper, everybody's made aware, everybody gets constant notice. I mean, the notices start as soon as code enforcement's aware it's a problem. So usually if somebody's coming in at the auction process, they've already received a number of notices that something was happening at this property. It does happen. We've had somebody show up at the motion hearing at the very end when they're approving a sale. So that means it went to auction, they already had the auction, and here we are with a successful bidder, and somebody shows up and said, what's happening? It's not very often, but it does happen. I think that's about it. If you have more specific questions, I'm happy to answer those.
Actually, that was a really amazing background right there. So I think that pretty well sums it up. I took copious notes. So, all right. So what happened in Holyoke for and just give me the period we're looking
Sure.
at.
I can tell you. So this is an update from October. So actually, some of these are completed now. So 1373, 1377 Dwight Street. This was an interesting situation. There's actually a commissioner through a probate court that was taking this, as well as a receiver. Al Albano, he's actually an attorney in Springfield. This is actually completed now. They found a successful buyer, and that sale went through, so now this is under new ownership. The probate court case that was ongoing got the proceeds that the receiver was able to get from this sale. So that'll be handled in probate court as to how that money gets dispersed. But this property is actually sold and done. 393, 399 Main Street. If you all remember, there was a fire here many moons ago, I believe in 2017. This one actually, there was a deal worked out with the bank and the receiver so that the receiver then became owner. So while it is on the receivership update, it's not actually a receivership and hasn't been for about a year now, I believe. And it is almost done. I think they're working on some finite details as far as the common areas, but if you haven't seen it or if you happen to have it in front of you, the last picture on here is a beautiful shot of one of the units. I mean, it's completely rehabbed from top to bottom in there, and you'll see that there's signage out there, there's safety lights that went up. We keep tabs on them as far as graffiti and that sort of thing to make sure that that building is staying up to snuff while it's not currently occupied. It should be shortly. 265 Sargent Street, this is actually a new receiver that we're working with. Like I said, it's random, so this one happened to come up, and Genevieve Construction Group is actually a female-run organization, and this one is underway. Last I saw, there were new windows. The interior is pretty near completion. The exterior, once you see the photos, it was kind of a mess, so now it's all nice and cleaned up. So it's just kind of run-of-the-mill, working its way through. I believe they hope to be done in the spring. So this is only a couple months away. 31 Alderman Street was an interesting scenario, an unfortunate scenario. This is one where there was a deceased owner, unfortunately deceased in the property, and people were unaware. Her family was also unaware until we brought the suit that she had passed away. So this one had a whole other myriad of problems as far as finding out ownership and running it through the probate court. So that takes some time, and unfortunately, when a receiver is involved, they have to secure their lien, and when there's a probate outstanding and you're not sure who the owner is, we generally tell them to cease doing any work, keep it secure, keep it clean. But as far as putting any major renovation in, we like them to complete the probate first to make sure that their lien is going to be secure, that there's an owner, that they're going to actually be able to do something with their lien, and that they're not just throwing away money. So this probate is done. They are working, and I haven't seen any recent updates, but I know it's coming up in court, I believe, this month. So we'll get a new, fresh report. The beauty of receiverships is every 8 weeks we do check in with the receiver. They have to give us receipts for everything, even down to man hours, overhead, all of it. So it's a very transparent process. 579 Hampshire Street is a huge project. If you recall, there used to be a homeless problem outside of this building. There was always mattresses and trash, and now we have a ready, willing, and able, what used to be a receiver. Again, this was worked out with the owner, where the receiver bought it out from the owner and is working on it. And the plan was to actually do it in stages. So these are 9 units, so it's 3 by 3 by 3. And the plan is actually to put one set online and then the next one. Working with the fire department as far as the new, whether sprinklers were involved or a monitored system, et cetera. So this one is, underway as well.
What was that number?
5-7-9.
Yeah, there's 3 numbers, yeah.
So it actually goes 11 and 13 are right next to it as well. But the receivership portion was just 5, 7, and 9. And actually, looking out these windows, it's a beautiful view from up there. So I hope that he can get it back online, and that'll be some great units down in that part of the city. Another receivership is 51 North Summer Street. This was a really bad hoarding situation. We actually called in Greater Springfield Senior Services to assist. And they were very good about getting him placement in another home. So this was actually owner occupied, which is a little more difficult. Obviously, we don't like kicking owners out of their home, but in this case, he really needed services, and owning his own home really didn't make sense. Greater Springfield had actually been working with him for a long time before we even got involved, so they were able to come in and help and really get him back on his feet. Unfortunately, this one got underway. The bank came in, and they wanted to take it back, and the court allowed that. So the bank, it kind of stalled out as far as the clean out was done. They did, because of the owner hoarding situation, there had to be smell remediation here. I mean, they had to break this down to the studs and do all sorts of treatments to the wood and floors and everything else. So once they got that underway and it was cleaned and secured, the bank now came in, and it stopped at that point, and the bank is going to foreclose. There is a local property manager in place, but we'll see if that one actually comes to completion. 57 Norwood Terrace is a beautiful single family. Again, this was another one where the owner deceased. So we have a receivership in there. They got it mostly underway with the rehab plan. And again, the bank came in, they proposed their own plan. So we are waiting to see what that plan looks like from the bank. They have to get that approved by the court. So essentially, if a bank wants to come in to protect their asset, they have to then take over the responsibility of putting this back into code compliance. So that's, all of these are very different scenarios, and you would think that the process would run streamlined every time, and it really doesn't. So this is one where the bank's going to take over. They have a contractor in mind. So we're waiting to see what their plan is proposed, and they'll pay off the receiver's lien thus far. So what'll happen is they'll get a payoff, they'll pay that, and then they'll put their own lien on the property, which essentially is protecting their mortgage interest. 253, 255 Walnut Street. I don't know if anyone's walked by that property, but this is one of the most amazing transformations I've seen in a while. Once you get the pictures in front of you, you can see what the house used to look like and what it looks like now, and it's remarkable. This has been an ongoing project for quite some time, but considering there was a red X on this building when it started, and now it's like a beautiful facade, and the drywall is almost up. This one will actually be done in another, I believe, month or two. So that's a big transformation for that area. Then we have 192 Walnut Street. This is a row house. This one's just, again, it's up and running. The plan is underway, just kind of run-of-the-mill. New windows are in. It's almost done. 393, 395 South Elm Street is one of the fastest receiverships we've seen done, I think. It started in March. The plan was approved in June. It just sold after auction. So it's not even a year. This one was a quick turnaround. There was a lot of drug activity at this property. Again, this was a deceased owner. Son was living in the property. And every time Board of Health went, building went, there were people just in and out, stopping on bikes, in the building, out of the building, and kind of scurrying away. So that is all stopped at this property now. And this was, they worked faster than their permits could get approved. So This was a great transformation for that part of the city as well. And like I said, it went to auction. Now the receiver owns it after being the highest bidder at auction.
Well, who's the receiver?
That is AAD LLC.
So Apple David LLC?
Correct.
All right, thank you.
And finally, for the ongoing 311 Walnut Street, so as you can see, we're kind of in that area a lot right now. 311 Walnut Street is partially occupied. This is one where, again, there's a probate action that was necessary. There's deceased owner, but 2 of the heirs were living in the property. And what the receiver did is made a plan in such a way that these people would not be put out of their home. So it's a 2-family. So what they did was they did most of the work in one of the units so that they could move the people into that unit and then work on the other portion, so that they could stay there. And what happens is they'll look at what the rent should be and deduct from that rental amount based on what the condition of the property is. And if need be, the court actually will go out and do an estimate of what the rent should be, and assist in any way they can if there's any discrepancy there. But it sounds like they've come to an agreement. Receivers have the ability to rent, and any rent that they take in during receivership gets deducted from their lien. They also have the right to evict. So if people are in there and they aren't good tenants, they're not paying, or they want to do a for cause action, they can also evict tenants. But in this case, we've been working with the owner. The cleanup outside is amazing. You couldn't even tell there was a house there. If you look it up on M.G.L, it just looks like trees with kind of a haunted house behind it. So now you can see it. The cleanup has been great, and that's Virgilio property. He's got some other properties out there, so it made sense actually that he would take that on.
That isn't next to near the armory, is it?
I believe so.
That's sort of.
Yeah, I think yeah.
Yeah, so as you can see, we're kind of all in a row down Walnut Street.
Right, yeah.
And then 2 of the ones that actually completed as of October, and as I mentioned, some of these have completed. We also have some new ones that you'll get an update for April coming up soon. But 50 Beacon Street, this was a single family. This was trouble for the receiver as far as, 1 step forward, 2 steps back. It seemed like every time they touched a wall, something else would cave in, or they'd find some other issue. This one actually went to the MLS listings. We requested that he post it for sale, being it was a single family. It was a nice neighborhood. We thought it would do well that way rather than another landlord-owned situation. And sure enough, got a decent offer. The bank, I believe, was looking to possibly make some cash from this, but I think once more repairs were done based on the buyer's request, I don't think that ended up happening without my notes in front of me. But that was a good outcome. You've got, a home buyer that went in there rather than a receiver that ended up with it by chance after an auction. And then 44 Ridgeway Street, this one's out by the college. This was an interesting house. It was laid out to be a 2-family when in reality it wasn't zoned that way. So when the receiver went in there, they had to reconfigure it. And the bank was very active in the process. This is one that the AG actually, the Attorney General's office actually filed with us. So it was kind of all hands on deck for a lot of the inspections because the bank was very aware that the receiver needed to stay within their lien and wanted to make sure that any repairs or cosmetic things that were being done were for the benefit of the property and not simply to make a financial gain. And so this was, everybody was involved every step of the way. This came out beautiful and it sold to a private buyer. So that one's all done too. I don't have any others right now. I'm sure there's more, but
all right, so
we'll
I
see 'em
think
in
that's,
April.
any questions for the solicitor?
I just want to say, well done.
Well done, yeah. Well, I think it goes without saying.
part of-
No, it goes without saying, it's well done. I think there's several counselors here that really deserve a lot of credit for getting this up and running. We kind of took a model of some from the city of Springfield, and now the law department with the code enforcement team has really run with it, and there's some, there's 13 properties right there the solicitors rattled off, so it's really exciting news, and we'll try to get a little more timely. But that's what we want to do. We just want to hear more about this and just keep it in front of us, and we'll try to timely file this. So we'll look to have her back in, probably another update in May, or our last meeting will be June. We don't mean July and August, but but we'll go from there, okay? So if I could get a motion, the order is complied with, that'd be wonderful.
Motion in the order is complied with.
Second.
On the motion, all in favor? Aye. Okay, Crystal, thank you so much. Thanks for your patience. Again? I don't think so. No, we got the department head here, and so I think we're in really good shape. If I could get a motion to take number 7 off the table.
Motion to take item number 7 off the table is discussion.
Second.
On the motion to remove number 7 from the table, all in favor? Aye. FY 2019 CDBG grant applications. This is our annual review, and it's really great to have Alicia Zeller with us, as per usual. Oh man, got the spreadsheet. It's wonderful. I love the spreadsheet. Alicia, if you would just introduce your staff, and then we can. I had it. Okay.
So, good evening. With me tonight is our finance manager from the Office for Community Development, Zaida Hoyt, who has been fantastic about getting this all set up for you. We will have running, depending on how you want to structure it tonight, we will have running totals at the bottom of the column so you can see the progress. I do have extra spreadsheets if you need them.
I need one.
Okay.
One, but it's an old one. This one? Is
Well,
that
what-
some of the votes on it?
you want fiscal year 20?
This is 20, 719, right?
One thing I'm missing is a pen.
Yeah, this is good. That one I had didn't have the,
Well, this one has the advisory committee recommendations.
yeah,
Yep.
I didn't have
That's-
that on this one.
I guess we don't
CAC,
need,
yeah.
right.
That's a good.
If I may, we also have a member of the public citizen side of our Citizen Advisory Committee here in the audience who's been patiently in the back. Kate Krockmeyer is here, as well as Councilor Valentin and Councilor Sullivan joined us this year on the CAC.
Okay, so, first of all, could you give Kate's last, give her name, please, again?
It's Kate Krockmeyer.
K-R-U-C-K-M-E-Y-E-R? Duly noted. Copy that. Thank you very much. Okay. And we really want to thank the counselors for taking a part in it. That's really important. And Ms. Kruckmeyer for taking a part. That's really vital. Okay, so Alicia, off we go.
So just as a brief overview, this year we decided to turn the process on its head just a little bit. And we, before we solicited applications this year, we went out to the community and held a series of listening sessions, both for the public as well as for advocates, the community at large. And one of the items that was in your packet was a brief one-page summary of those listening sessions. And the goal this year was to gather some community input before the applications came in the hopes that the applications would be reflective of what was heard. I think we have mixed results, but it feels as though the process was more transparent this year because we weren't trying to establish what the community needed based on a funding request. Otherwise, we, again, this year tried to build capacity for organizations to apply. We did a 1-hour lunchtime brown bag training for folks many weeks before the applications were due, where people who might have been interested in funding opportunities could come in a friendly, easy, relaxed atmosphere and talk about what are the federal requirements, how to apply, what does the application process look like, and that garnered a couple of new applications this year as well. The proposals then came in, they were distributed. We've now met as staff and put out our recommendations. We have met with the CAC and they've issued their recommendations. And what we've been trying to do this year to some degree is to compartmentalize recommendations. And so the CAC developed theirs without actually seeing ours. And so as each level goes, the reviewers don't necessarily see what the prior recommendations were, so that you're starting with a clean slate. Again, this year we have it structured so that the spreadsheet is set up with all of the applications that can fall under the non-public service category. Those are all laid out first for you. And those are the categories of acquisition, clearance and demolition, code enforcement, housing, public facilities, public infrastructure, economic development. And then the second category of applications competing against each other is the public services, the youth, special needs, employment, education, training, and then the final category is for the planning and administrative services. We expect this year to be level funded. Up until a couple of weeks ago, we didn't know what was going to happen with the federal budget. And then once things got settled after the shutdown and the budget, we now understand, although we haven't been notified, but we do understand that both CDBG and Home have basically been level funded for FY19, which is great news.
That really is.
It is, yeah. Good.
All right. Okay, so we have, let's see here. We have requests of no, we're just in, I'm just in the world of non-public service right now. We'll go to public service in a bit. But non-public service, we had FY19 requests of, now stop me if I'm wrong, Alicia, 3.6 million, and it looks like you have funding for 816,000. Am I wrong?
No, that's correct.
Okay, all right, so just a quick math, it looks like,
You have a
based upon about 25% is in funds available for what's there for need. Just a quick math on that one. And I think traditionally what we do is we just kind of walk down the list, and I just, we just take a vote, okay? So I think that's pretty much it. Councilor Valentin.
Thank you. Councilor Sullivan was reminding me that, I guess it was last year, based on, just like this year, we did at the Holyoke Public Library, a several-hour meeting with the advisory committee, and the fact that he had been present at that meeting last year. This year, actually, it was both of us as 2 of the 5 members of DGR. Councilor Sullivan was reminding me that last year, his recollection is that we did a motion to actually accept the recommendations from the advisory committee as they were, and they were taken as a package and put in as the DGR recommendation rather than going the line by line. Is that correct based on your memory, Alicia?
It is, and I know at the end there were some adjustments along the way, but where you have 2 of the 5 members of the committee at the CAC, that would certainly seem appropriate to sort of lead the discussion and go that route, depending on.
So I guess that would be my motion, is that we go with the recommendations of the advisory committee based on the fact that 2 of the 5 members were present at this multi-hour meeting at the Holyoke Public Library.
Councilor Sullivan?
Yeah, I would also like to see that happen. The Citizens Advisory Committee was a very diverse group. They spent a lot of time going over it, and I'd really like to see us respect what the citizens group came up with. We'll get another shot at it anyways in a full council meeting if there's any tweaking we want to do, and just to put it forward with and mirror the recommendations of the Citizens Advisory Council.
Great. And then, Alicia, we don't have numbers from the mayor, so traditionally we do. Is that part of the tradition, or am I missing a tradition?
No, normally by this time we do have the mayor's recommendations on the spreadsheet. He and I have not touched base yet to actually get his numbers on here, but they are forthcoming. And then the mayor will take into account all of the recommendations and then issue in the final column, the FY19 awards.
Right, so I don't think I've ever taken a vote without the mayor's recommendations. I don't think I have. Do you want to correct me on that one? No, you can't, because we've always had the mayor's recommendations every time.
Yeah, we did, yeah.
Never had a CDBG spreadsheet without the mayor's recommendations on it.
No nefarious purpose other than he and I have just not connected.
No, and I didn't imply that either.
Yeah.
That wasn't implied or
Oh, no,
or
no.
said, for sure, but I'm just stating a simple fact. Never once happened, and I'm not being corrected, so I guess I'm right on that one for a change.
If I could just add a comment.
Sure, Councilor Valentin.
Also, during our meeting with the advisory committee, as you all know, I mean, obviously, we have a very limited number of funds to work with, and so there was a very lively discussion about what was a priority versus not. And I mean, just for the record, every single proposal we reviewed was very much worthy, but the reality is that the funds are very limited. So as a group that evening, the tone, just to give you all an idea, was that, for example, if you look at the neighborhood improvement program under non-public services, that we are proposing $207,840. They requested $311,850. We actually, towards the end of the meeting, figured that if there were any, small pools of money that we could still kind of pull from with whatever little resources we had left, we really wanted to see it come to the neighborhood improvement program, because we know that these are real examples of families that are being impacted, our constituents, our residents, our taxpayers who need assistance with some minor repairs in their home, or need, some kind of pools of resources that they don't have access to otherwise. So that's why that number is, kind of that random number that really doesn't match the request. I mean, we couldn't match the 311, but we tried to get as close to that as possible. And then you'll see, a number of programs that, or proposals that were, again, very worthy, but we felt, if we could put money towards neighborhood improvement program, which could impact a large number of people, versus a proposal that could impact a handful of folks, we kind of went with those types of examples and pockets. So I just wanted to say that our discussion that evening was very much centered around how can we most impact the highest number of people with the limited resources we have. And that was kind of the tone of our discussion.
Great.
Yeah, I'll defer.
Councilor Murphy, go ahead.
I was trying to let the young people have a first say.
That would be me.
Well, he's younger than me too. Just a couple. First of all, I understand the work because I was on that when I first started in 1973. Couple of things in both on the proposals, but ultimately, whatever we do, whatever the mayor decides is what happens. Am I correct?
Yes.
You are correct.
So whether we get know what the mayor wants or not really should have no impact on what we want to do at this point. So just make that point. But a couple of things, and I'll defer to the two councilors who are on that committee. And having been on the Parks Department, the city parks capital improvements, and I kind of looked at the fields, and I've been on, as you know, I run baseball leagues, and I've been on many fields, and I go to games, and it seems to me like that's a lot of money for some of the things that we're doing here. Player benches, I can, if need be, I can certainly see that. But there's a lot of places people are telling me they need player benches, and I go look, and they look pretty good to me. And then there's protective fencing. I certainly agree with that. I'm assuming that's by the areas. But then there's new backstops, and I've looked. There's only a couple that I really think are needing new backstops, or even portions of a new backstop as opposed to an entire new backstop. And so I'm just wondering if we really need the 90,000 there. So that was one thought. And then in terms of the Scott Tower master plan, if I'm understanding that correctly, that's just to have someone look to see if we can come up with something? Is that the idea for that? So again, to me, I think that's a lot of money to find out if we can do something. I mean, I know they don't come cheap, but I would be more than willing to cut some of that to put some money into the other areas that have a direct impact, like neighborhood improvement program or other things. So, thank you.
Bill Sullivan.
No, I was just going to echo my previous sentiment. I'd like to, we do get another shot out of the full council meeting for anything that Councilor Murphy mentioned there for tweaking it. I would just So recommend we go forward with the will of the Citizens Advisory Council with the added footnote that really would like to see the mayor do that as well.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I think the Citizens Advisory Committee has always did a great job. I tend to support what they have to say. I want to also commend the work of the OCD staff. Always does a great job summarizing things and putting in its input. You know, how do you disagree with any of this? I don't see it. I mean, the only thing I wish there'd be a little more money for sidewalks, but you know, at some point that'll circle back. You know, maybe next year, maybe Alicia, you'll say next year there'll be more funds for sidewalks and.
So one of the things that we did this year in the non-public service category is we encourage particularly our city folks to put in as many applications as they saw a need for public infrastructure and public works projects, with the thinking that if there is an additional allocation of infrastructure dollars, that when those dollars, if they ever come to Holyoke, we would have proposals and have thought through the process of what are our needs, and that if the opportunity came to apply for funds quickly, or if the Office for Community Development received funds for infrastructure, that we had a number of projects sort of in the queue, thought about, laid out, that sort of thing.
Yeah, Alicia, I really appreciate it because you're doing the best you can. I'm just going to, again, vote for I think I brought this up every single year since I've been on the board. So I'm now my 8th year, so this will be 8 years on this committee. It's the same one I bring up every year, which is there's I think a true need for a new sidewalk on South Street where it connects with High Street. And so and it's really for constituents coming from the High Street area, and they have to walk in the road bed to work their way up to South Street Shopping Plaza, not for a long distance, but for a distance. And it's really at the 391 interchange. Just to orient people, it would be across from the nail salon, kind of across from Whole Donut in that area. And I can't tell you, there's countless times where I've seen mothers with a walker, a stroller, going up there in the roadbed, and this is no good. And there is an existing sidewalk because that area prior to 391 was a commercial district. That's where Marcotte Ford started, for example. And so working your way up, to me, it's a low ask to connect an existing sidewalk and make it handicap accessible. And by the way, that's all City of I've researched this now numerous times. It is confirmed that's all City of Holyoke property. It's not Commonwealth of Mass, even though it is an interchange from 391. That's all City of Holyoke property. So that's really what I was thinking. I mean, certainly there's other areas of the city that need sidewalk improvement. That's one that's, to me, is crying out for it. So. But without the funds, we can't do much there with it. Councilor Tallman?
Just a brief question. On the, was there any like money last year, the reprogram, you do that every year, and where would that go to for the audience?
So right now, we don't have a figure for reprogramming. A number of our parks projects were delayed in the last 2 years due to procurement, and they came in, when they went out to bid, they came in way over bid, so we did some reprogramming. We bid it again. Now, those bids have actually come in lower. And so as the projects are done in the next 60 to 90 days, we may have a small pool of funds available for reprogramming. And so one of the things the CAC did, as well as the staff, was we made the recommendation that if there are additional funds on programming, give us an idea of where you'd like that earmarked. And so the CAC, as one of the councilors mentioned, said, if there's extra money, we'd like it to go to the neighborhood improvement program.
Right.
But right now, we don't have a figure or a bottom line yet because our projects, our park rotation projects aren't completed yet.
Okay, and the timeline, if we do this tonight, just accept the recommendation of CAC, and then tomorrow the vote, everything is lined up. I mean, tomorrow the full council will vote, and that's we
so the
can
full
make cuts
council,
if we want.
The full council would vote tomorrow night to issue its recommendations, as well as doing the resolution to submit the grant application, and then the mayor will issue his his preliminary recommendations, and then we go through a 30-day comment period where folks can look at everyone's recommendations and make comments, and then we need to get this into HUD around the first week of May.
Okay, so on timeline, we're all on
So
track.
far, you're doing great.
So far, okay.
Yep.
And I really, I was also on the CAC when I was first elected, and I know the work that they do. And it's important to, that's where the meat of the work gets done within that committee and the dialogue and the discussion. I know there's been, we had several meetings, hours at a time, 2-3 hours at a time, discussing and looking through the book. So I go along with that recommendation of the CAC too.
Council Sullivan.
Also, didn't the CAC put out a list? There was a couple of caveats and stuff. I'm not seeing that here with this package.
Yes, the CAC had 3 specific recommendations. The first one was that if the community policing program was funded, that the minimum number of walking patrols should be 55. That was balancing against the pay rate and the grade of the officer that was working the beat to ensure that there were a maximum number of patrols and that there weren't fewer patrols, and we were paying high-level officers high hourly rates to do those. So it was 55. The second one was if the Paper City basketball public service was funded, that's a new organization, fledgling. We'd never worked with them before. And so in order to help them develop their organizational grant management capacity, that the financial piece of it would be run through our office as opposed to releasing any funds to Paper City basketball. So what they would do is they would submit invoices and we would pay them directly on their behalf. And then the third recommendation, which is what we've discussed, is if there's any increase to the 19 allocation or if there's any unprogrammed funds, that those annual allocations or unprogrammed funds be directed to the Neighborhood Improvement Program. And you all should have received, we submitted hard copies as well as electronic copies to all of you with the CAC's memo. We did that several weeks ago. Okay. Yep.
Okay, so we're on the non-public services proposal. Councilor Murphy, I think you heard what the CAC members wanted to do, and Councilor Tallman kind of reiterate. I'm agnostic to it, but there's certainly merit on both sides. If you want to make a motion, that's what we're here for. So,
No, I'm fine.
you're okay? Yeah. All right. So, motions been made and seconded to accept the recommendations of the CAC. On the motion, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. All right. So we'll do that. Then we'll go to the public services, and again, you can't really complain about anything that's been done in here. So.
Again, a motion to accept the advisory committee recommendations for this segment as well.
Second. Second.
All right, just on, okay. And Alicia, just on Paper City basketball, what was your, we're jumping around to public service. I wish we hadn't done that, but.
So the CAC had 2 special conditions on the public services. The first one was on the community policing program, and the condition was that if funded, that the minimum number of walking patrols should be at least 55.
Total.
Yes.
So 55 walking patrols with okay, so that's going to be implied in there anyhow, so 55 walking patrols? Mm-hmm. All right, and then on Paper City basketball?
And then on Paper City basketball, the condition states that to develop this organization's grant management capacity, the OCD, meaning the Office for Community Development, should be responsible for payment and processing of all invoices as opposed to releasing funds to Paper City basketball.
Oh, that's not unreasonable, so. And do you do that with new entities generally?
We've been trying to explore methods to support new entities that may not have the managerial experience or the grant capacity experience or the financial backing to do a reimbursable basis. And so this is one method that we've identified. And we have tried it once with community cleanups, where we worked with neighborhood organizations and we paid the dumpster bill for them. In this case, this is I would describe it as a fledgling nonprofit, but their mission is valuable. They're providing a service to a number of young people in the city. And in our mission to try to increase nonprofit capacity here in the city, as opposed to providing the funds for the same program, same agencies over and over, to diversify a little bit, this is one method that we can do that.
Oh, that's great. And do you...
While also protecting the federal dollars, I should add.
Well, I mean, you've got a pretty good track record of doing that, so I'm not surprised. Do you think you'll hear from the mayor between now and tomorrow night's city council meeting?
I can ask.
Well, generally, we at least have what what the mayor's numbers are. I mean, I'm just surprised that we don't have it. Okay, motions, did any councilors want to address any particular vendor?
I just want to mention
Councilor Valentin.
two things. Number one, I abstained from the vote for Girls Inc. at the advisory meeting, and I will tomorrow as well because I'm on their board. So just for the record, I was not a part of that conversation. And also the piece about Holyoke Police Department, Sergeant Hart was at the meeting that evening at the public library, and he was very much on board with what we were talking about. So this 55 number didn't kind of come out of the blue. It was a joint effort. So for the record, it was a joint effort in collaboration with the Holyoke Police Department with the presence of Sergeant Hart at the meeting.
Great. Councilor Murphy.
I'll ask you for this. So just in terms of the Holyoke Safe Neighborhood, the back-to-school event, and I know they didn't ask for anything last year, and I know they've had programs before. Can you just explain why they didn't get anything?
So that one, we know, we had a pretty long discussion about this one. We know it's a very successful back-to-school event they have every year. And again, we just felt that with a limited number of funds we had, they do have some other quote-unquote sponsors and funding sources that they can refer to. And so we basically figured, instead of funding that or funding it halfway, that we would put that money into other groups that perhaps didn't have those alternative funding options.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Is that correct, Alicia? Okay. Just want to make sure my memory was all right.
Okay. Alicia, what's the drop-off center? Would you just explain that for me? Police Department drop-off center?
So the city's police department has been stepping up in conjunction with other providers like, I believe, CHD and Behavioral Health Network, providing outreach services to our folks that are living on the streets or maybe suffering from addiction or mental health issues. And the drop-off location would be a place where staff could take folks that are being picked up on the streets to do assessments and that sort of thing, as opposed to going into a criminal justice environment like taking them to the police station. More holistic approach to doing some of the street outreach. And they've been, I have to say, the police department's been a really great partner. Our office has stepped up its efforts around homeless servicing. It's not a field that any of us are really experienced in, but we've been working with the police department, working with the city of Springfield, and doing street outreach and trying to get more of our panhandlers and our homeless population into shelter, into appropriate housing. And so this is really to augment the police department's servicing around those issues.
And so are they uniformed officers that do the outreach, or is it some kind of a...
I believe it's a combination of plainclothes and uniform officers. I believe it's a combination.
So it's not social workers or anything like that. It's
a team approach, and so there may be social workers, psychiatrists, psychologists, addiction folks, as well as folks from Elliott Mental Health Services does a lot of the work with the street outreach. And then we've been meeting as a team every 3 to 4 months. Like I said, and the city of Springfield has been providing assistance to us on that.
And is there actually a drop-off center, or is that just a euphemism?
No, they're gonna have a separate office space. It's my understanding they would use CDBG funds for lease payments. Right now, I don't believe there is a space, and this would be a new venture.
For lease payments. All right, and where would they be leasing space?
I don't think the space has been identified yet. Bless you.
Okay.
David?
Okay, so will you be, will your office be monitoring that? I mean, in other words, working with HPD on that one a little more closely than you might otherwise? Because if you
So
don't,
we do, so every CDBG dollar that leaves our office, every penny that leaves our office has the same level of scrutiny and payment protocols. And so, for instance, if that program was funded, I would envision operating on a reimbursable basis where one of the agencies or the police department pays the rent and then we provide a reimbursement based on the documentation they submit. If reimbursement wasn't possible, then we would get a copy of the lease agreements and all of that as documentation, and then perhaps make lease payments directly to the landlord.
yeah, how could they reimburse? I mean, because in other words, because they have a pretty detailed budget, and so what you're saying is that they might have $25,000 in a non-program part of their budget, which they quite possibly do,
Yep.
but not that they would admit that. So I would wonder, I'm not sure if I'd be really keen about having that be reimbursed.
We do, we work with whatever agency is awarded funds. We work on providing the financing in the best manner that suits both the federal regulations and that agency. And so generally we work on a reimbursable basis. If it's a case where, like Paper City Basketball or the community cleanup program that we did, where folks didn't have the reimbursable cash available, then we can set up a system where we make payments directly to the vendors. So.
Right.
And until the program is funded and we actually get a final budget and we see what is the use of the CDBG dollars, it's hard to say how it would be structured.
Now, then the other part is, of course, if a city entity is leasing, licensing, procuring any space, that has to come before city council. There's no debate on that.
So that's out of my realm.
But now you've been made aware.
Yep.
Anything by any city entity relative to real property on a lease, a license, or a procurement or a disposition pursuant to state law has to come before a city council vote. So there's no debate upon that. Now, I understand we have a new vendor in City Hall that did not come before a city council vote, but we deal with these things every once in a while, and so we'll take it up again at a certain point in time. I'm not going to worry about it right this second, but for example, if there's a Sodexo company using space on the first floor, selling snacks and beverages in the former Weights and Measures building office, that never came before this body, and yet supposedly a company like Sodexo is using that space to sell snacks and beverages in City Hall. So we have to deal with this constantly. Why it is, I don't know, but now you've been made fully aware that if the HPD is leasing a space, no matter where, it's got to come before leasing or licensing. That was a famous one that we resolved a few years ago. Or procurement has to come before a city council vote. So now you know that before a nickel is paid.
We can do that. We can actually make that a condition of the grant.
Right. Well, it's state law.
That's,
so yeah, if you make it a condition, that'd be just as
we
great.
can make it a condition to call it out.
Oh, sure, of course.
Is this the new one? Yeah. I just want to look.
All right. So, okay. So that being said, yes, Councilor Sullivan.
Alicia, and you can correct, just to be clear on this drop-off center, and I'm trying to remember the facts here, but
I'm pulling it up.
right now, I believe the police department is using the lobby of the police station. Is that right? And it's been problematic, just for members of the public coming in on regular business. And one of the things we brought up was just several blocks away in November, a homeless person froze to death right outside the Boys Club. So we thought this was really, something worth giving a shot.
Yeah, it sounds like it, Counselor Sullivan. Yeah, it sounds like it. And then lobby's probably not the best place for that use, but
yeah,
I made my point, so. All right. Motion made and seconded on just accept the recommendations of CAC. On the motion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Hearing none. All right, then,
If I may, is that what the two conditions, do you want the two conditions of the CAC to follow through with the DGR on the Paper City basketball and the walking beats? You want your conditions to follow through?
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, do you want us to reconsider the vote and just explicitly mention that?
Please.
Okay, motion reconsider, please.
So moved.
On the motion, consider, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, a motion's now been made and seconded to accept the CAC recommendations with the aforesaid preconditions. The motion as so stated, and also with reiterating the city council, necessity for a city council vote for a license or a lease. We shouldn't even have to say that, but we'll just say it anyhow as a condition. So with those three conditions, motion's made and seconded to accept the CAC recommendation on the motion as amended. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? None. Okay. All right, Alicia, so we've got that vote in the banks.
Would this be the possible location, based on location of activity? That's my interpretation, because it says 208 Ray Street. Is that where they're proposing? I was trying to quickly read through the stipulation, but, because you were asking about an address.
Right, well, that's, okay, so that's a proposal, right?
I believe so.
Yeah, well, we haven't voted on it.
No, I know.
Right,
I know,
so-
but you were asking about a specific address, so I was just wondering if that would be.
Well, that sounds like a potential address, doesn't it, right there? It sounds like a good one, so.
I'm not
why
sure, I'm not sure if that's the final space, if that's the intended activity location.
So-
Because it's, as far as I know, it's not currently operating.
So we didn't vote on 208 Ray Street second floor. We didn't vote on that. We just voted to say that.
It's you voted on the allocation.
That's right, that's all we voted on. Okay, and Alicia, you need a third vote for administration and planning? If I could get a motion?
Motion to recommend the
Yeah.
administration and planning.
Okay, so the motion's made and seconded to accept the recommendation of the CAC relative to administration and planning. On the discussion, hearing none. On the motion, all in favor? Aye. Motion's made, any opposed? None. Okay.
No.
Oh, okay. Did you say no? Or?
No,
He said
you
no.
said any opposed,
Oh,
and
okay.
I said
Oh, okay, no, so no one's,
Opposed.
no one's opposed. Everybody's good to go.
You're good.
Okay,
Aye.
so, aye, Captain. Okay, Alicia, do we need any other votes on the
So
home?
I want to confirm, I didn't have a note on it, that if there is unprogrammed funds, the DGR committee requests that they go to the neighborhood improvement program, comparable to what the CAC did. I didn't hear that as a,
I talked about it as
talked about
a
it,
point
as
of
a-
our conversation.
Yeah, can we, listen, whatever the committee wants to do, I'm fine with it, but when you say something like that, it's so vague and broad, and we're very good, I think, to the neighborhood improvement program, and perhaps there may be, I'd rather just have it come back here and we'll probably just vote for it anyhow, but do we have to take that vote now?
You don't, because the Citizens Advisory Plan allows for very small increases to any of these activities, and anything, any major funding changes have to come back to you anyway as part of our internal process and rules. So,
Okay, you okay with that?
Come back to
That's
that.
fine.
I mean, we would be back in front of you for
Okay,
a major reprogramming.
Well, I just want to run it by the committee first. I mean, I don't,
That's fine.
you know, this is not, a whatever, so, okay, so they're all good to go with that, so we'll just hear from you, well, hopefully we'll have that, that'd be a wonderful meeting, and, it'll be great news, it's sorely needed.
So what we'll do is we'll put your numbers on the spreadsheet. I'll try to get to the mayor tomorrow, and then we'll submit it to the city clerk for tomorrow night. I can email it out tomorrow to all of you if that's acceptable.
Sounds great.
And do you need us there tomorrow night?
You know, Alicia, it's a public meeting, so if you want to come, great. If you don't want to come, that's okay too. I think in years past, since I've been the chair of this committee for 5 years, I don't think any counselor really has drilled down beyond what I state.
Normally, we're not here, but if there was
But
some...
you've been here before. I know you have for
Okay.
full city council meetings, but I don't think any non-committee members ever really asked too many in-depth questions beyond what's on the written page.
Right.
So I'm going to.
Right.
Right,
Right,
we only dish out the best, that's what we
That's
do,
right,
so that's how we roll on this committee. Okay, so I think we're all set as far as votes goes. Okay, if I could just
Do we have to vote on the home funds?
If you want to vote, they go through an RFP process, but that was sort of the layout. So if you want to vote, that's fine. Usually you don't.
You don't, no, you don't.
Okay. Okay, so then the last order of business
Thank you.
would be just a discussion of the next committee meeting date, if we could,
Did we address number 6 here, Dave?
Yeah, we took it with.
we did, it's all taken up. Yeah, we took it as a package, voted on it as a package. But thank you, Council Sullivan. If we can look at a date in April, could look at, for example, April 8th. Is that, are committee members okay with that date?
Yes.
Monday?
It is, I just prefer Mondays, Terry.
That's fine.
The only, there's a comment, we discussion on that earlier piece tonight about neighbor to neighbor. We were supposed to bring it up before.
Well, I
the
mean,
meeting.
their preference is that first meeting in April.
Well, we
but-
tabled it.
Yeah, I know. So we're gonna table it that night,
Well,
April 2nd.
well,
I thought we were gonna meet.
well,
here
it's in
again.
committee.
Yeah,
It's in
it will-
committee. I can't meet April 1st, so there's that.
That's okay.
That's okay, so I'll go with.
So,
I'm
so
all right with the
we
8th.
can take it up on the 16th in full city council.
Yep,
Is that good?
yep, that's fine.
Okay.
That's no problem.
Okay, so the next committee meeting of this,
The April
the next meeting of this committee will be April 8th
6,
at 6 PM.
Okay.
yep,
April 8th, 6 p.m.
April 8th.
And I think we're through the end of it, correct? Okay.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to adjourn. All in favor? Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you.